Hello everyone, it's time to roll for combat. I'm Mark Seifter, I am the Roll for Combat Director of Game Design, and I am joined today by... Derek, you go next.
No one of importance or note.
And?
That's gonna be hard to follow that one. How do I top that? An invisible stalker.
All right.
I'm Esper. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the best art in the AD&D second edition.
It was my favorite.
Monster Manual.
There you go. That's less is more.
Yes.
I'm Esper. I have a YouTube channel called Esper the Bard. I've been running it since 2009. So old guard of the Dungeon Tube sphere. And what can I say? I love tabletop role-playing games and fantasy and writing, and I make books. And I also have a Kickstarter going on right now called Gauntlet Runner, which is a 5e campaign of hardcore dungeon runs. And that'll relate to the theme that we're talking about here today.
All
Who
right.
doesn't love a good dungeon design stream?
Yes. And it seems very appropriate to do. Now with 80% fewer 80s movies references than usual. So
Well, you know what? You spoke too soon, Mark, because I was going to say, Esper, this is a nice tie-in. They are re-releasing Running Man, which of course is
I just found that out. And Running Man, like,
is a classic 80s movie. Yes.
Yeah,
You're right.
That is one of the inspirations of which there are many inspirations for Gauntlet Runner.
Okay. Yeah. As soon as
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, as soon as I head over to your Kickstarter, because again, forgive me, there's a lot of spinning plates, and I'm not really big into the 5e-verse, so I was not aware of Kickstarter. But I hopped over to your Kickstarter page, and I was like, oh, this sounds like the Running Man, but done with dungeons.
It
There's a
does.
bit of that in there. There's a bit of Gladiator. There's a bit of
Right.
Dark Souls. There's a lot.
Now, by the way, studies have this has been proven statistically that if you say Dark Souls-esque, your sales go up at least 30%. I think that's
Really?
that's the new nomenclature.
Okay, I don't think
for
that
Kickstarter.
can possibly be true for everything, though. Like, if
No,
you're
anything.
doing,
It
like,
doesn't
a
matter. If I did a
cozy cottage core game, and
if
then you're
I-
like,
if I did-
it's
if I
Dark
did-
Soul-esque.
if I did a Care Bears Friendship is Magic Kickstarter, okay, and as long as I made it 5e compatible and Dark Souls-esque, it's gonna do way better. It's gonna do gangbusters.
You know what? I actually may be more likely to check out a Dark Souls-esque Care Bear Kickstarter than a normal one, just because of the fact that if you actually delve into, like, the existential horror of the Care Bears, like,
Right.
think about it. This is a thing. This is a show where you can see there will be, like, this kid and, like, her dad died, so she's sad, which is normal. It's a healthy grieving experience. And then these strange bears are going to come up and they're going to shoot mind control beams at her until she's, like, maniacally cheerful and smiling and happy as if, like, her
Right.
dad never mattered to her at all or whatever. It is like, is
Right.
this good? Is this actually horrible mind control?
It's like the debate which occurred on and off throughout the decades, right? Which is the enchantment, / charm, school of magic, is that actually more evil than, let's say, necromancy? Because like mind control in some ways is like worse than killing people, and it's far more evil, but we sort of blush over it. The Care Bear stare is basically a dominate person, Mark. It's basically
I put a
Maybe it's
sidebar in the
with
Pathfinder
like
2
a period
core.
between each letter, so it's like an acronym. It's like creatures of atrocity, rage, and
Evil.
help me out here.
Evil.
Creatures of atrocity, rage, and evil bears.
yeah. There you go.
But yeah, Derek,
Right,
I put a sidebar in the. You probably saw it in the spells chapter of the Pathfinder 2 core rules, near dominate, that talked about that idea. It's like, you know what? These spells don't have the evil trait because they do not channel the power of, like, the abyss directly. But, like,
Right.
pretty much almost any usage of them that you can think of is likely to be evil.
Yeah, but I have always thought that was very like a weird way to describe it, because if I throw a fireball into an orphanage, right, like that's pretty evil as well, right?
Oh, yes, but if you use a fireball to create, like, a bonfire to light your camp or to survive in the Arctic, it's not. Whereas it's hard to conceive of a use of dominate that is not like pretty squicky.
Yeah.
Unless you're one of those people who thinks that animals don't count.
I mean, if there was somebody who was about to go commit a mass atrocity and I, charmed them and dominated them and then they didn't, right? That's a good
Wouldn't
act.
you have had some other way of doing that other than dominating
Right.
them?
I could have done the much more politically correct and expedient thing of just kill him, which is far more acceptable.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've had characters
That's what I was
before.
going to say is there's a lot of magical effects that they seem like they're so crazy, but in the end you could just cut someone's head off with an axe.
No, you're right.
The best condition is dead. I mean, that's the truism that's true today as it was then.
I've played characters before who were pacifists and who didn't agree with me in real life about mind control and thought that it was a better option than murder. And it's a tough question because they're both obviously very extreme solutions. But today we're talking about dungeons.
Well, dungeons is you're right, because you're going to probably
mind control being just one element that could potentially be in a dungeon.
That's true.
I mean, old school. One of my favorite D&D memories. I don't know if this was AD&D First Edition or if it was BX D&D, but I remember there was a low-level campaign, and the wizard who had one spell. Which was randomly determined, which was Charm Person, which back then had a lot more latitude in the in the creature types they could. And this guy ended up collecting like an ogre, a bugbear, and like something like there was a whole coterie of chaotic creatures that were way too powerful for the party. And of course, obviously, the spell back then lasted for like weeks, depending on their intelligence. But you never knew when it was going to fall out, and it was the whole thing. It was a great gamble. Anyways, long story short. The party didn't do anything. They just sent in their chaotic army of evil creatures to do their bidding. But it all stacked up on the power of Charm Person, and the dungeon experience was, I think, better for it. So, and I played an enchanter in EverQuest 1 for a very long time, and my policy was just charm a monster and have it go beat its friends to death. So I'm a big fan.
That was my character in EverQuest 1 was an enchanter. Do you remember having to sneak into the Dark Elf town to get the enchant silver?
Oh, yeah, you had to, but you either had to change your faction or you had to cast an illusion and sneak in.
Yeah, I had to cast an illusion.
They don't make them like they used to.
To disguise myself as a dark elf to get the enchant silver, which was important for enchanters back then, and it was also part of the Stein of Mogos quest, which was a big enchanter
Stein
quest.
of Mogok.
Yeah, Mogok, I thought it was, but it was Moggok or something like that, right?
Yeah, right.
And so
definitely dual wield double steins.
I was doing fine. I even got my enchant silver, but then the cleric of like the god of hatred, Ilnaric, or whatever his name was.
Inarok.
What?
Inarok,
that's it. See? He came out of his temple to kill me because of the fact that he hated my deity so much that it didn't matter if I was a dark elf, I had to die. And that de-leveled me to the point that I could no longer disguise as a dark elf. So I created a dark elf, like, Shadow Knight of Inarok, and then dragged my corpse all the way back to a place where I could get it. That quest was so messed up. I also created a paladin of, like, peace, so that I could, like, strangle to death the carp of peace in, like, the pool of peacefulness, so that there would be a corpse around for my enchanter to pick up, which was another ingredient that you needed to avoid like a lengthy side quest to get like a dog to spit out a dead fish or something. Do you remember this quest, Derek?
This one is, you're losing me, but
okay, that was also part of the same Stein of Mogok quest.
Yeah, it's been a long time, 20 years. But anyways, yes, somehow this ties to dungeons.
It does, because a good dungeon is one that is interconnected and that tells a story, in my opinion. If your dungeon is just completely just like you rolled randomly every single thing that's in it, and then you didn't take into it, I mean, you can randomly generate something really cool if you then think about the way to connect the things you generated. But if you just do it randomly and place everything in there, and then it's sort of just like a curated experience with railroads from one room to the next room, each just some vastly different thing that doesn't even make sense together. not a lot of creativity or room to explore or use your ideas of how the dungeon works to take a creative approach, then a dungeon can be pretty boring, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am very famously, I know some people really love it, but like I like hate the AD&D first edition random dungeon generator. You know, and they kind of reprinted it in the 5th edition DMG. And I know there was like a very there was like a popularity of like these things called depth crawls, right? Like Stygian Library and what was another one? There was another one that was like by Stygian Library, where it's basically just random procedure. Like there's just no rhyme or reason. It's just like completely random procedural generated rooms. And I think that you could use that as a tool to help you get your ideas situated. But I am a big believer, as you, Mark, that dungeons are their best when it's environmental storytelling and when, you know, the dungeon has a purpose, even if its, you know, purpose is to hold treasure and be a challenge zone. It should still be structured, and I think it goes a lot away. And I think a lot of people who have had bad experiences, they go, "Oh, I don't like dungeons," and I go, "No, you just don't like, you just dislike bad dungeons, and that's fine. I don't like bad dungeons either."
I think that's true. Like, to me, I've had some boring experiences in bad, repetitive dungeons, especially. Even if it's like, yeah, this is a noble's mansion and all the rooms tell the story of it being their mansion, but every room had dark creepers and dark stalkers in some number, and there were like 12 of those encounters, and I got bored. Whereas I've had dungeons I really enjoyed is when there's a story to it that makes sense, and especially where not everything in the dungeon is all working together necessarily. Like, there is one adventure where there's a dungeon where, like, an adversary group is delving the dungeon to try to find the artifact before you. And our group pretended to be, like, exterminators that were hired to come in and help deal with, like, haunts, because they were in this weird old ruins. So we were, like, ghostbusters. And when we managed to lie our way all the way up to the leader of the group who was in there, the adversary group, who figured out that she didn't call for Ghostbusters and that she wasn't afraid of no ghosts. So we then defeated her quietly, used magic to, like, replace her, and then basically stage a coup of this organization by having her run off into the dungeon and saying that a person who was under our pocket was in charge until she got back, which she never did because it was a fake. And so, like, this just led into, like, scamming different parts of the dungeon and factions. We still fought, like, most of the encounters, but not all of the ones that we scammed our way past. But it's a story I still remember, whereas those basic dungeons that are just like, oh, sure, it was a room, and there were... I guess I still remember the Dark Creepers and Dark Stalkers because it was so bad and so repetitive, and the GM was eventually just like, you know what, you guys, you always win these in one round, so we're just going to skip it. There were more Dark Creepers.
Is the Darkspeaker Dark Creepers, is that from Shackled City?
No. It was from Part 5 of Council of Thieves. Walcourt has just a lot of Dark Creeper and Dark Stalker encounters.
Yeah. What about you, Esper? What's your general philosophy for dungeon design?
Pour my heart and soul into it. Yeah, man. I want every room to be an adventure unto itself.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, I like the dungeons to be dynamic, where the players are engaged and they really have to use their wits and they're on the edge of their seat. You guys were talking about boring dungeons here, doing some descriptions, and I was kind of grasping, like, do I have any experiences where I could contribute to that? And I don't know that I do. I mean, I've seen plenty of pilot sessions and my Living World campaign, and I've played plenty of one-shots and other adventures with many different GMs, but I mean, I always take those in the context of like, oh, here's somebody who's like learning the ropes, and so I don't know, I guess it didn't really hit me as like, oh, this published adventure is whatever, boring or just not doing it for me. It's starting to come back to me now, though. I used to run a number of Dungeon magazine adventures back in the 3rd edition era, And it is true. They would have certain areas in dungeons where there really just wasn't much going on. But even then, they usually did a pretty good job overall with the adventures. So I guess that would just be a minor gripe of mine that like, oh, areas, 12 and 16 are just kind of a nothing room. It's like, oh, the cultists use this as their storage,
Yep.
or this is their latrine, or a cave, a cave crawler,
Carrion
gosh,
crawler?
Carrion crawler.
carrion crawler. Almost something cave crawler, crypt crawler, carrion crawler. Once dwelt here, but the bugbears in the other area already killed it and ate it, or extracted its brain for poison. So yeah,
Right, so, yeah,
whatever. Little details, no biggie. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess since I'm so much of a creator and a writer myself, and I'm like pumping passion into everything I do, that's that whole, I guess, side of the RPG experience where it could go boring or weak sauce is, I don't know. I just like kind of cut it out of my mind entirely.
Also,
Yeah.
that Dungeon magazine era was a pretty strong time for overall adventures. Probably because, they got a lot of submissions. And if
Yes.
it was 10 encounters with dark creepers or something like that, they probably would have chosen something else to publish in Dungeon magazine. Whereas
They were crafted. Yeah, they were crafted. And I relate to that. I like to make crafted content that has been revised and revised and revised and built up with many layers, like how a painter, will do a bunch of layers on a painting, or a sculptor will do many passes on the same clay or the same stone. I like that sense, just not only in RPGs, but just in all art forms in general. You can tell when something has been crafted, and you can tell when something is kind of half-baked.
Yeah, I've done a number of very lengthy streams about dungeon design, in particular mega dungeon design, and one of my rants is frequently about empty rooms. And I argue that even if it's necessarily realistic, I go, number one, if someone's buying this from you, they're buying an empty room, and I'm like, it didn't really. It feels like filler because it is filler. But the other thing is, fundamentally, I view dungeons as a play space. I view them as a game board more than I view them as sort of a realistic environment. And that's not like I want it to be like a funhouse zany dungeon. Oh, here's the room full of trampolines and mattresses. What I just mean to say is my principal design is, how do I create an engaging play experience out of this location, rather than thinking like, I kind of eschew Gygaxian naturalism. And I don't really care where the toilet is. It's like, is this going to be fun? And like you said, there might be this room and it's empty, and there's a whole 3 paragraphs talking to the GM about how the bugbears killed the carrion crawler here. But like, the players could never learn that. And what is the point of that room? And sometimes an empty room.
The DM is something for the bugbears to talk about when the player sneaks up on them and listens in, eavesdropping on them.
You could have done that without a room, though. That could have been been a second use of another room. Like, I'm not all the way.
Soup is making my lips go numb.
Yeah. Right. Oh man, we should never have killed that carrion crawler in that empty room over there. Yeah. So
I'm not all the way on Derek on this regard, because I do think it's sometimes useful to have those other rooms in case you need them. So if the PCs, let's say that we, there was an empty room, but this is where this person sleeps. If the PCs are like, I want to wait until they're asleep and then gank them, then I want to know like where that is so that I can do that. But if it is useless, like, this is where they fought the carrion crawler, where they could have fought it in one of their other rooms.
Yeah, useless is the key word there. There's a difference between empty room with a purpose and empty room with no purpose. So I'll give you 2 examples of empty room with purpose. So in the Living World campaign, I have this one region called Woe's Weird, which is brooding area, let's say. It definitely has a brooding, far beyond the hinterlands, exploring ruins of magical war that once took part here.
my brain jumped to, it's a place where like they spawn creatures, like a brooding. When you said brooding,
rather than dark and brooding. Maybe
overcast,
both.
gloomy, strange environmental effects happening. And there's this one kind of secure area that's a sanctum, and that has it's sort of a religious order. I'd say sort of it. We could call it a religious order of the pantheon, multiple gods running it. There's a lot going on at this sanctum, and the sanctum is sort of like a fortress, and there are these 4 main towers that let's say evoke kind of the main elements of the sanctum. So the one tower is much like a library archive, and there are mystics that will go about their mystical studies in that tower. Then another tower is this roost of bats, and there's like a blind priestess there who can speak with the bats, and she uses the bats as messengers. So it's sort of like the communication hub / an oracle. She's like an oracle as well. So kind of an oracle. And then the other tower is the bell tower, and it's more militaristic, and they keep the time, and they ring the bell so everyone always knows what the hour is, and they train the guards and the soldiers, and like they bring like the lawful element, the order element. But then there's the hollow tower, and there's nothing in it except for it's just gloomy and dark and stairs that lead down somewhere, and they tell you don't go down those stairs. And it contrasts because the whole area is full of like character and NPCs and stuff going on. It's very like interactive and it's very active. But then the players come to the hollow tower, and it's the atmosphere shifts, and there's such a contrast in the tone and the style. And I just described that briefly as the GM, and the players like they feel that atmosphere, and they feel that like what's down those stairs. And then they go talk and ask NPCs, and depending upon who you ask, you'll get different answers. Different people have different like rumors or just kind of like gossipy tales that say, oh, this is what's down there. If you go to this like misbegotten ancient undercroft that was here before it got converted to this present day sanctum. So that empty room serves a lot of purposes. It could be a launching point to delve down into an adventure. It could be like an atmospheric world building moment, or it could be leading to role playing where you go speak to NPCs, and one say there's a Medusa down there, others say there's like it's sealed off, and if you pass the seal, you're going to come upon horrors from a misbegotten ancient time, and you don't know who to believe. So that's one. A different empty room is in one of the Gauntlet Runner dungeons, and it's a small space, but it's where 4 different paths come together. It's like this nexus area, and it serves as a decision-making moment. And typically when the characters get there, they've just survived something pretty brutal. And they get there and they're like, oh, well, like we survived that last room. Then you get to this nexus point and you see, okay, we could go that way or that way. And the Labyrinth Lord at the beginning gave us this piece of advice. And if we go that way or that way, we know we're going against his advice. But, maybe there's something down there. Or we can go the 4th way, which we know is like, that seems like that is moving forward through the dungeon. That's to like make forward progress to the dungeon. So it's what would you say that is? It's a key decision-making place, and it's a moment of reflection where you're like, we just survived something terrible. Do we dare go against the advice and try to brave something else terrible, or do we want to make forward progress?
That nexus point is another example of a very key example of a time you might want to have a mainly empty room. No, that doesn't mean it can't have something interesting to find or look at or examine there, but is for pacing of encounters. They don't have to be fight. And in some cases it can be useful even from an insulation standpoint of a like, well, there's another room in between so they don't hear the encounter that's right that they would have if they were right next door. Or this is a spot where the players could like sort of stand and they open the door from this room that doesn't have any enemies in it, and then the enemies in the next room could come in, and the fight may spill out into this room.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Well, that I think highlights what I think a lot of people miss about the inherent value of a dungeon, which is a dungeon done properly creates it's a physical representation of a flowchart, and as such, you give the players can't go to a room that isn't there, obviously. Like if you make a dungeon and there's 12 rooms, then you know that those are the 12 locations the players could go. Now, you could design those 12 rooms in some sort of linear fashion, and they have to go into them, room 1, room 2, 2. I don't think that's particularly good design. But if you're like, say, in a wilderness or a city or in many other circumstances or situations, the problem is the possibility space is technically kind of infinite. And that can be very challenging because the players might want to go to the Thieves Guild in the city, and you go, oh shit, I didn't even think about that. I didn't design that. What do I have to do? Running an adventure in a city or a forest or a mountain can be very challenging because of that. Dungeons have this really distinct advantage that you can build it and then basically tell the players, go left, go right, go straight. You can go where you can do whatever you want to do.
Yes.
And I can give you that freedom to make whatever choices you want without screwing me over and putting me on the spot to have a ton of prep and a ton of information for stuff that I couldn't possibly have prepared for. And that's not to say that in RPGs, we still sometimes have to wing it. But dungeons are kind of a sweet spot because, again, it gives the players true player agency. It gives them the ability to interact with this environment in a sort of very sandboxy fashion. However, it is innately limited by the rooms that exist. And so you don't have to worry about the players going to room 13 if room 13 doesn't exist. And that's the real advantage, I think, of a dungeon, more so than anything else.
There's an entire episode of Arcade Mark that Linda and I did like last week or something that was basically entirely this. But we pointed out that the same is true for a hex crawl because the hexes are the flowchart. And the same is true for a lot of things where you quantize things into a flowchart so that you don't have to describe an infinitely continuous state. And according to Yunderlin Games in chat, Dire Dan also did a video that said the same point. So this is such a good point, Derek, that it looks like lots of people are making entire videos on it, and there could be multiple videos discussing this in depth. With Linda and I talked about how you can actually then take that concept of the flowchart and go level yourself up and like have a flowchart that is sort of on top of the flowchart, and what that means about your overall design for dungeons, adventures, and just about everything. I put a link in chat for people if they want to check the Arcane Mark one.
Yeah, a dungeon can certainly be a sweet spot in terms of a balance between openness and limitation. If things are too open, it does risk just completely falling apart at the seams. It gets vague. What are we doing now in the session? I don't know. And the GM maybe has to scramble to improv something that he's maybe doesn't really have the wherewithal to improv, like a Thieves Guild. Hey, we're in the city. I want to find a Thieves Guild. And then suddenly that's like additional weight on the GM who's already juggling like 100 things. And now he's like, oh, is there a Thieves Guild in the city? I don't know. But you have to start thinking this like very complex, multidimensional thing with all these factors like immediately on the fly. Whereas the other end of the spectrum would be kind of like where you said, something that's too restrictive and too railroaded.
Well, right. That's the danger of a dungeon.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, gosh, I want to make a dungeon now where it is linear. You just go in a straight row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Make it really cool.
Those are kind of
you could make it really cool.
Well, I mean that
more boring.
that is kind of the
What
modern.
if at each new room the characters had to make the decision, do we move forward or do we not? And there's some kind of like dire sacrifice that has to be made every time.
See, now you're making it more interesting because it's actually
Right.
a flow chart
Yeah.
that has connecting lines pointing back to the beginning of the chart in each one instead of just one line. You've just added new lines to your flow chart.
Right, because now you can make the decision: do we go forward or do we go back? And so now that's a innately more interesting decision point. But generally speaking, you know, I tend to avoid, you know, what we call, you know, hallway dungeons. And as we have super geeks here, I'm sure most people are familiar with melon diagrams, as they were called on Ian World like 20 years ago, where basically you can like diagram. It's a way of diagramming a dungeon and pointing out that a lot of dungeons that may look very, you know, expansive and as we would say, well jacquazed, are in fact actually fairly linear, because a lot of the offshoots don't really lead to where you need to go. And now, to be fair, there's also a little bit of clever design where you can kind of funnel, you know, people towards, you know, an ultimate decision point. You're like, look, if they want to proceed forward, they're going to have to go through room 7, but they could go room 1, 3, 5, 7, or they could go 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, or they could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's a lot of different ways to get to 7, and they're going to have a very different experience. But ultimately, you know, all roads lead to Rome, and apparently room 7.
Right.
In my personal design, I try to avoid that.
Their experience in room 7 is going to change a lot depending upon decisions they made in a couple prior areas.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Did they find the secret in room 3, which gave them a vastly different leverage over the challenges of room 7?
Yeah. And so, you know, because we talk about this idea of expanding options, right? And then ultimately they kind of invert and start to come to a point, right? So you try to create a more of a diamond shape in your flow chart.
Sure.
One of my personal, this is just for me, I wouldn't even necessarily recommend this, but when I design dungeons, I actually try to actively avoid that. Only because I want someone to look at my dungeon and I go, can you show me, this is a very deep cut. It's like when Ender was able to recognize where the queen was in the swarm hive because he could see that they were all swarming around it. I ask people, can you find the central point of my dungeon? And a lot of times the answer is no, I can't. Like it all kind of looks the same in terms of its connectivity. And the way I design dungeons is I design them to be completely nonlinear. Like I don't necessarily want to focus to a point, but I certainly don't begrudge anyone who does, especially if your dungeon is serving as more of a storytelling vehicle than it is, you know, just a place.
Also, if it has multiple floors, the stairs leading up and down the floors are naturally going to become focal points no matter what you do.
But even in that regard, one of my personal philosophies is provide multiple entrances and exits, right, to every dungeon level, multiple stairs down, multiple connecting points. You know, so even in like a typical dungeon, let's say level 1 of a dungeon, there might be the main entrance, there's a secret entrance, there's an unused entrance, there's stairs down to level 2, there's a pit that goes straight to level 3. There's the back stairway that leads down to level 2, a different part of it. So I try to give people to try to avoid that funneling, Mark, because I really want to, you know.
Sure, but there's still 3 very clear points.
Absolutely. And then, of course, that's presuming they don't just dimension door straight to level 2. But
sure. You never know what your group is going to do. I've definitely been in a party that dimension doored through the ground because we knew there was a dungeon underneath. Oh, yes. But unfortunately, we wound up in a shrine to a deity that our characters barely knew about and just called the snake god of assholes. I think it was Diomazul. And it was just full of blades that all tried to murder us with like 50 traps. So it was not a good experience of dimension dooring straight into the ground. But it sure was deep in the dungeon, and we skipped a lot of stuff.
Yeah. My Dimension Door story is a 3rd edition campaign where we left all of our gold and platinum back in town, or spent it all or whatever. And then we went into the dungeon, and then I cast Locate Object Platinum Piece, and then marked the location on our graph map, and then went like, you know, 100 feet to the east, and then I cast it again, and then we triangulated where that was, and then I used, you know, trigonometry to figure out that was 400 feet that way, and then we dimension doored exactly 400 feet that way, and sure enough, teleported straight into a hidden secret treasure vault, and looted it blind. And then I told the GM, I won't do that again because I agree that that was really cheap and cheesy, but it was fun to get away with it once.
Derek, would you say that you are more of an inclination for large dungeons or mega dungeons?
Yeah, large and mega. That's definitely
okay.
my style. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm picking up, which, yeah, that can be super cool.
Yeah.
I kind of like everything. My channel is called Esper the Bard. Part of that is because there's a lot of interest that I have in a lot of things that spark my inspiration. So I'll do everything from mega dungeon to a very focused short dungeon where it's like you have this specific goal, get from point A to point B, to sandbox, theater of the mind, heavy role play storytelling. Like there's something in there on all of those.
I grew up on, Rapana Thuk and Temple of Elemental Evil and all this other stuff. But I will say, back in like the 2010s or whatever, when the one-page dungeon contest first started, that really gave me an appreciation for sort of, elegant, small dungeon design. Not to mention, there's some really cool art that got drawn back then. And I used to bring all those games, those little dungeons with me to cons and stuff like that. And I would usually run them with like Dungeon World or other sort of micro light games. And I definitely think it could be a really fun session or two to just, go into a dungeon, the infamous 5-room dungeon model or whatever that people always talk about. And I think that could be fun. I think it could still be a fun place for that kind of experience. But my personal preference, is for the big chonkers. And
Sure.
where, you will never find all the rooms. You will never experience all that stuff. And I don't necessarily know that that's as much in the zeitgeist of what people play or do these days. I definitely feel like the mega dungeon has.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think
it
it's kinda
varies
everything
from person
goes
to person.
nowadays.
But a lot of people don't have as much time, so they're going for shorter and shorter things.
Mhm.
Even when I'm designing something that's 5-room dungeon style, though, I still don't always follow the normal philosophy where it's a little more funneled. And I'll just make it so that you can kind of take things in your own order. Like, there was a 5-room dungeon jam a while back that a bunch of dungeon tubers did. And the one that Linda and I did for Arcane Mark was basically, if you think about a dungeon that is, the flow chart of the dungeon is a square sort of with an X through it, and then there's a dot in the middle. So there's 5 rooms. You can come from any of the 4 rooms on the outside, which are then connected to 2 of the other rooms out of the 4. That's the square. And then all 4 of them can go into the middle. And in the middle is sort of the fortune teller's tent, who's the head of the circus. Because it was a fairy circus where they were a variety of potentially cheating or selling you weird stuff or trying to get you to eat the goblin fruit and be stuck there. And so you could experience it from any different direction. It was technically 5 rooms, and it had the things you would expect in a 5-room dungeon, but 5-room dungeons usually want to curate your order of them, and that one didn't.
I think anything can potentially be done as long as it's done well. And there's always a pro and a con. There's always some kind of trade-off. So with the mega dungeon or the large dungeon, the pro on that one is, well, there's just so much exploration, freedom, player agency, that exploratory element, and the the quantity of content is really the strong point. With the less large dungeon or the smaller one, the upside there is that you can really focus the tone, the tension, the style. It's very difficult to maintain style across a large space, or even if you're a writer and you're writing something, it can be a big challenge for writers maintain the style and the focus across a whole novel compared to just a short story. So that's one thing with Gauntlet Runner that I think about a lot is style. Each of the dungeons has, like, it's supposed to have quite a bit of style to it. Mark, you've experienced 2 already, and they were pretty different. The first one was a little more linear, though, with some areas that were branching paths or secret areas. And then the second one was more like pretty open. It was kind of open, a big area, and you experiment and see if you can solve the challenge. And
Yeah.
they both had some distinct styles that were important to them.
I would say that they were pretty different in exactly the way you put it. The first one was more, it started off almost just like, here are the challenges. Can you get through to the next safe room? But then after there was a point where there were 3 choices of ways to go, each of which had a challenge, it then opened up into a slightly more open, wider area with different monsters, and the idea is just like, which ones can you avoid by going a particular way, and which ones are going to come after you, or at least the way I experienced it. But I didn't even see all the ways I could have gone in that last part because I managed to hit the exit without going to some of the others. Whereas, yeah, the second one was a big open area with a variety of puzzles, and everything was just on a timer that we were trying to solve it before the time ran out.
Mm-hmm.
And
For the
people
time
can
ran
go to
out
Esper's
and the
channel
slug
and
demon
watch.
thawed.
Yeah, people can watch me in the first one and watch my team that took on the second one, which included a bunch of other great players, and a lot of people on this channel. A decent number are Shadowdarkers, so Kelsey Dion was on there as well as the wizard, with a very silly but creative solution that allowed us to outsmart one of the challenges in the puzzle.
That was a fantastic session. Your squad's run of Conflicts Crucible, with you, Kelsey Dion, Ben Milton, and Hank from Runehammer.
Absolutely.
That is a amazing session. I highly recommend everyone go watch that. Just search, what would you search? Esper the Bard, Gauntlet Runner, and you'll be able to see, you'll find it in one of the episodes. I know I'm biased because, like, you know, it was my dungeon and stuff, but I think that is one of the greatest sessions of D&D ever recorded. And it's edited to cut out all the filler, all the hum thinking moments. That's all cut out. So the video is like a tight, it's maybe 1 hour long video, something like that. It's a whole session in just 1 hour with nothing but just the constant flow of action and role play. So
I thought it went really well.
It was fantastic, yeah. And you guys did good. You were the victors of that round of Gauntlet Runner. And I'm hoping you're to come back for Dungeon 3. I've already started recording it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm available though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if we can find a time.
It's a pretty brutal one.
What system was this?
It's D&D 5e.
It's 5e. There are some mods to the rules for my campaign setting that make it a little grittier, a little more tense, but not any like there's not really any like heavy, massive, like they fit on one page. It's like you can read in one page what the mods are to it. It's basically playing to the strengths of 5e. 5e gives us superhero characters. Okay, let's put the superhero characters through gauntlets of non-stop hardcore challenges.
Having to go by yourself in some of them can definitely be challenging in a game that's meant to have teammates to help. And I heard that, I guess I saw briefly that some of the challengers on the first one did not survive till the end.
Right. Yes.
They met their demise. Although on the other hand, Baron Durop played a wizard who didn't even want to cast his spells, and he still his pacifist wizard still made it through. So
0 offensive spells.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, he did find some kind of creative ways to use them offensively, but he didn't deal any damage.
Right.
So yeah, and in the end, he eked out first place. Though, I mean, he was kind of a bastard and was right on the razor's edge of complete failure. If the boss of the dungeon would have made the wisdom save against his charmed person, he would have been. Wow.
I'm not familiar with your series. You mentioned first place, so is there a scoring system like Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, or is it a player-based scoring?
So you can play Gauntlet Runner in different ways. You can play it just as a standard campaign, like DM with his group, let's go through the campaign. It works as a campaign. It also works as a dungeon run competition. So you can have players compete against each other, either with solo runners or with squads. And there's just a simple scoring method in each dungeon, which is basically you get a point for different things. Like, did you overcome the challenges in that room? Point. Did you find that secret treasure? Point. Did you accomplish some goal? Okay, you got a point for that. And among the survivors, whoever got the most points wins. Or you could just use them as standalone modules. Like each dungeon just functions as its own module right by itself, and you could insert those into whatever campaign or setting that you're running.
Yeah, that's another great point, which I think goes unappreciated in today's environment, which is the value of the dungeon as a module. And by that, I truly distinguish it from an adventure. A module, by its very name and its nature, implies that you were able to take it and drop it relatively easily into your existing campaign framework. And I feel like a lot of adventures, and I use the term loosely today, are really just campaigns. Like it's like, hey, there's this adventure. It takes you from level 3 to level 15, and it's set in this very highly specific thing. You're not going to just be like busting that out, and dropping that into your campaign. That is the campaign.
That is a longer campaign than 95% of the campaign.
Exactly.
It's really a mega adventure, but it sometimes just says it's an adventure.
Yeah, but really at that point, it's a campaign. I mean, as Esper was saying, people don't play that long anyway. So like when you drop that on it, to call it an adventure, I think is underselling the point. So whereas if you look at some of these old classic modules, the whole idea was, hey, you could pick this up and drop this kind of anywhere you want to do. And that's not even, when I say old, I don't even mean that old. If you look back even to 3rd edition, the original
the
run
ones
of Dungeons,
Esper was talking about, the adventures from Dungeon Magazine. They
or
were an entire adventure start to finish, and you could often complete those things in a single session, depending on which one. Some of them would be multiple.
Depends on which one.
Depend on the length.
Yeah.
They had very varying lengths.
Or even the ones that were published. Sunless Citadel, Forge of Fury, Heart of Night, Spire, all of those adventures basically took place, over, say, 1 or 2 levels of the PC's time. And they had, hooks why the players might adventure here, but they were super generic and just designed to be dropped in anywhere, basically. And I always found that to be very, very cool and very helpful. And I love it for that. So.
Yeah, I mean, they had some in Dungeon Magazine that were a big, giant dungeon, and it would probably take you
I blame Paizo, Mark, because they started I blame Paizo because they started the adventure path, and arguably it made it very popular, and because it turned out that people really liked that.
People like that interconnection. It's just like with TV shows, people like having like the long myth arc on the show rather than just the disconnected episodic.
I'm an episodic TV fan. That's I love like Star Trek: The Next Generation. Where, sure, the characters are the continuity, but each week is a new thing, and maybe you have these very occasional, like you called it, myth arc type episodes.
Sorry, I like Deep Space Nine better than Next Generation. They're both great. They're both great. They're very, very good shows.
Right. I love Deep Space Nine. But to be fair, Deep Space Nine didn't really it was started off pretty episodic. It became more continuity based when the Dominion War stuff happened. Anyways, point is, I like the episodic nature of adventures. And I love the idea of characters going into an adventure and they spend a level or 2 there. And then, the movie ends, and the next movie doesn't come out till next year. And hey guys, when we pick up our adventurers, it's been 7 months, it's been 8 months, the existential threat was dealt with. You guys actually won. It wasn't like this, the princess is in another castle, which pretty much happens to you continually in these adventures, where you're like, you beat the boss.
Bad guys come back again.
Right.
Somehow Palpatine survived.
Somehow.
The classic go-to is that wasn't the real boss. They left behind a journal, or there's some sort of note, and the note basically says, vague hinted crip about my real secret boss and real actual mission, hinting that this is much larger than you ever gave it credit. And then that inevitably leads into the next adventure. And then you just rinse, repeat until you reach usually 20th level. And then finally that final boss is the real final boss. And, and you beat Bowser and you roll credits. But I
the
like
real
giving
somehow is, why are people supporting this?
Because they like it's convenient, it's easy. You know,
It's
I
been
think a lot of
around
people,
since Thank You Mario, but the princess is in another castle at the very least.
yeah, exactly. People, you know, I think fundamentally, I think people, a lot of GMs buy adventures because they want it to be simple and easy, and they
Oh, I
want
was
it to
thinking of the bring Palpatine back thing.
oh
Oh,
Like the real somehow is somehow people are buying these movie tickets or streaming or whatever and facilitating the the ability for these things to get produced. That's the real somehow in my mind. Because yeah, okay, the story wise is stupid, but they're companies, they're businesses. They like money. They want to make money. They see money cow. They want to milk money cow. Not a lot of mystery there. The mystery for me is why are people paying for this?
well, some of it is nostalgia.
Take my money to destroy my mythology.
Some of it is nostalgia. I've literally
It might be masochism
I mean,
or self-hatred.
well,
I
there
don't
was
know.
also
like
a
I've
great
talked to
no,
someone
no.
who
There
you
was
know
also a deal of a popularity, especially during that time, if we're specifically talking about the sequel series, of like subverting expectations, right? And you know, being kind of almost deliberately trollish. But yeah, I think it's just a nostalgia
Like a
play.
Schadenfreude, like you want to see the train wreck.
Yeah, well, but also just like
I think
like
just nostalgia.
I think it's probably nostalgia.
Like
And it's like,
here's
hey,
here's an
you
example.
could create a new villain, and they created Snoke, and everyone was like, yeah, what is this, like a knockoff Palpatine? And they're like, okay, kill him and bring back actual Palpatine, and people are like, yeah.
So like
Yeah.
just to give an example
Subverting
of like the
expectations
people
is not
who
what makes something good. Making something good is what makes something good.
Well,
I think you're right, but people will watch it anyway, right? Like so that bad Indiana Jones movie that came out, right? Like everyone
Yeah, another perfect
everyone
example.
knew it was bad. The critics said it was bad. And my dad was like, I'm going to go watch it. I was like, why? Everyone says it's bad. The critics said it's bad. He's like, I know, but it's an Indiana Jones movie, and I really like Indiana Jones. And so he did.
I love the original
Right?
Indiana Jones. That's another inspiration for Gauntlet Runner.
Right?
Like I love the thinking that goes into it, along with the action and the style and the personality. It's got like all the dimensions working so well. And then it's like,
agree.
hey, let's dredge up the cadaver of Indiana Jones and like whip him and put the electrodes in him and like do this weird farce to somehow people are going to pay for this.
But yeah, my
Right,
dad
well,
paid
because
to see it in the theater, right?
right. Well, because if they made a new movie, no one would go see it. Because people don't take chances and people don't take risks, and it's just easier to bank off of established IPs and dredge up the corpse of Harrison Ford, who's not dead. But
I get all that. The thing that I don't get is why are people supporting it? Like, why are people paying money to see their own meaningful personal life mythologies be abused and exploited?
well,
Because
my
it
belief,
is their personal life mythology, and something is coming out for it, and they're so married to that brand that they want to see it. And if it was like, I don't know, some other random state, if it was like Tennessee Tom instead of Indiana Jones, they wouldn't, because it wasn't Indiana Jones.
yeah, I like the idea of Tennessee Tom.
Kentucky Keith.
Kentucky Keith.
Well, there's no alliteration in the first.
No,
one,
no. I mean, it doesn't necessarily not have to have alliteration, but Kentucky Bob. Yeah, I mean,
Jones is the last name.
You're
so they
right.
have to be
Kentucky
like,
Smith. Kentucky Smith.
all right, I'll do you one better. Look at everything that 5e produces. Like, they're weirdly nostalgic. It's almost like, hey,
same thing with 5e. Yeah.
remember Strahd from Ravenloft I6? And everyone's like, no, I wasn't born then. And they're like, so it's like, who are they making that for? Are they making it for the 48-year-old person who grew up playing Ravenloft I6? Or because like the mythology of Strahd doesn't mean anything to the modern 5e player who started playing, let's say, in 2018 or something, or 2016. But everything that they produce now is like hey, here's B2, Keep on the Borderlands is our new starter set. And it's like, does that mean anything to anybody anymore? I doubt it.
Things.
Right, but they weren't playing B2, Keep on the Borderland. And like they made the Spelljammer set, and they made the, whatever. And it's like they made the Dragonlance book. And like Dragonlance means nothing to anybody who wasn't alive during the 80s. And it's like, so who are they hoping that this appeals to? Again, the 50-year-old nostalgia gamer, maybe, I guess. But are they really the target
into
demo?
the multiverse sludge flow and are somehow buying these things?
So I don't understand how that market philosophy even works. I really don't know who the
people try to bring
is.
back their childhood by buying things. That's what I've seen, is that like the types of products and brands that remind people of their childhood can now like sell things that cost like a ridiculous amount, and the now wealthy enough people from that generation who have a lot of money to go around will try to buy back pieces of their childhood by buying whatever is currently out now of that brand, even if it's not even as high quality as what was being made in the 80s back then.
Yeah, but I think the point Derek was making is that the main target age demographic for Wizards of the Coast were so young that they wouldn't have nostalgic memories of Strahd, Dragonlance, etc.
Right. And to be fair, it's my understanding
they would have like vicarious nostalgia through watching Stranger Things or listening to their uncle talk or something.
Right. And my understanding is that Curse of Strahd is apparently a fairly well put together module, and I'm sure it has to do with the quality of the original. The original was a classic for a reason.
Pretty good.
I have not played it.
B+ tier, I'd give it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you think about all the rest, and I understand that a lot of those books bombed, the Spelljammer. I wasn't a big Spelljammer fan, but let's say I was in the the 90s, and then they release a Spelljammer book, and I'm like, oh cool, I get to pick it up, and I'm like, oh cool, look, Illithids and Githyanki, and oh look, I've got my Spelljammer helm. But even I probably would recognize this as a bad book. I'm just buying it for the nostalgia play. But if you're a modern generation, if you're age 30, if you're in your 30s or you're in your 20s, you probably didn't play Spelljammer. In fact, you probably weren't even alive when it was being produced. And you look at the book and you just go, this is a bad book. Like, I have no tie to this. So it's garbage. And then the book does badly. And so you'd think, okay, they would give that up. But somehow they just continued to reiterate and rehash this.
Well, Derek, I think that the axes of whether or not something is a nostalgia play versus quality are not always correlated. Some nostalgia play things are really, really well done. And you look at that and you're like, this is, even as a standalone, not doing any nostalgia bait is just great, right? And some things that are not nostalgia or nostalgia are not well done. And there are also things that aren't popular that probably are well done, right? So in terms of D&D books, like Radiant Citadel was not nostalgia bait. I heard it didn't sell very well. I thought it was cool. Personally, it was my jam. But it wasn't nostalgia bait and it didn't sell very well.
I haven't looked at that one, but in my mind, it's like I associate it with like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Strixhaven. There was like a number of books that came out for, what would we say, like a 3-year span that was like the end of the 2014 D&D, like the 5e 2014 lifespan or cycle or era, let's call it the 2014 era. And I didn't play them. The art kind of was a little too, what would I say, colorful. It didn't have that like gritty medieval look that usually appeals to me with fantasy. And I usually saw them at like a lot of them on discount at the store. So that
they experimented for a while.
But they might have great adventures in there, and I'm just totally oblivious to it.
Well, they experimented for a while with these books that had like 20 authors. And they were all kind of like, I want to call them almost like micro adventures, jammed into
Anthology of micro adventures.
Yeah, basically, as I understand it. And each one written by a different person. But I think they were supposed to be kind of loosely tied together, and it's questionable how or why whether that works.
So
And
my understanding is the Radiant Citadel is like a setting, and it's like the launching point for all these small adventures.
right, it's a hub. It's a hub. Yeah, it's almost like
It's kind of like a sigil inspired.
yeah,
thing.
correct. And Icewind Dale I think was the same way.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Icewind Dale's another book I'd put in that
Yeah.
vague mental category.
right. But again,
I got a
it just showed though. But like it was almost like getting a big issue of Dungeon Magazine, right? It's like, hey, here's a bunch of different little micro adventures written by a variety of different authors.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, like the what was they did like these not wrap up edition, but sort of like collection editions that were a thicker volume that had more content in it than usual.
And they sometimes had ones that had a little bit of a connecting between them, like Tales from the Infinite Staircase, where there is an infinite staircase, and that is the meta story, but then each door and portal you're going through, there's a new story on the other side.
You got them confused. You're combining Tales from the Yawning Portal with Quests from the Infinite Staircase.
Quests from the Infinite Staircase. You're right, and I did.
But those are like two of the 5e books I own. I own those two, and they're basically just because they're reprints of classic.
Well, yeah,
because
there's the second edition Infinite Staircase book.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, Yawning Portal, tied to the Undermountain.
Hasbro presents Was the Coast presents Adventures in the Multiverse presents Mordenkainen presents
Okay,
Tales from the Inn of the Tavern.
In
of the
fact,
Staircase
Derek,
of the Dungeon
I did
Entrance
not
of
get it
Doom.
confused. I just looked it up. The book that I was talking about, second edition Planescape Tales from the Infinite Staircase, is by Monty Cook, is called Tales from the Infinite Staircase.
Got it. You were using the second edition one.
That's correct. I was thinking
you
of
were
that one
referring to
because
the
that's
fifth
the
edition.
one I actually used more. But yes, you are correct that there is a 5e Quest from the Infinite Staircase as well.
But as an example,
And that is an example of a callback to another one. I think they were both pretty good.
this book, it has like Lost Caverns of Sojcanth in it, and it has like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, and I'm like, is that what the 5e audience? Is that what they want to play? Is that if they want to play, a module from the 70s, like kind of reprinted? I don't. It was very strange to me.
If it's done well, in theory that would be fantastic, because you're like, oh, I'm getting to participate in the heritage, the lineage of this game that stretches back.
And now
generations.
I understand what all
The problem
of
is that
those
they're not done
other
well.
people are talking about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Again, I am outside of the 5e universe in regards to being aware of what's
You're
good.
never outside the 5e universe.
I
It
am
is all encompassing. Its
No,
tentacles are up everything's orifices.
I am well established outside of the 5e universe.
What game is your jam right now?
All of them, but
All of them?
Yeah, I mean, my channel basically covers everything that isn't 5e, basically. So, right now,
What are a couple of big ones?
Right now, we've been spending a lot of time talking about Daggerheart, The One Ring, Fabula Ultima, Mythic Bastionland, some of the various Magpie PBTA games. So yeah, we do a variety of non-traditional games. I would say.
What do you think about Daggerheart?
I love it. I think Daggerheart's great. I think it's a PBTA inspired game with narrative forward mechanics that brings in a certain element of crunchiness that you get from some of the more traditional D20 modern games with, the ability to select feats and powers and they call them cards, but they're basically just feats and powers. And I think people enjoy that. So I think it's a pretty cool game system.
And if you are trapped alone in a room for 100 hours and you want to feel like Derek is there with you so that you're not alone anymore, you can go to his channel and there may be a playlist of his Daggerheart content, which is probably at least 100 hours long. And
at least 100 hours.
Start it playing and leave it on in the background and hear all sorts of analysis from Derek about Daggerheart in 6-hour episodes.
There's a lot.
Right on. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, though. I'm hoping I'll get to experience it at some point before too long. I'm going to be going to a small gaming convention here in a couple weeks. And unfortunately, the Daggerheart tables already were booked. They were already filled up with players. Though I am going to get to play Starfinder for the first time, which I've been wanting to play for a while. So Mark, your spirit will be with me there.
There we go. I'll protect you from being turned into space dust.
Starfinder is pretty cool.
Okay.
Obviously it's
We'll
obviously it's Pathfinder 2. Mark, is there a name for the Pathfinder 2 system?
You mean like forged in the path, found in the path, or
found in
something
the path
like that?
or something like that? Yeah.
There's not.
I don't know what to call it. Like I just say Starfinder because Starfinder 2 is like, oh, it's
people usually call things just in the they usually call them blah finder if they are like in the Pathfinder family, like Starfinder.
Right. It's a finder game for sure. But they did some cool stuff and it's got some fun little design. But it's basically, it's a D20 game, so it's six stats roll high versus DC.
Okay.
But so it's not.
Well, I always have lots of ideas for creating an RPG and ideas for different mechanics, and I doodle and dabble when I have like my tiny sliver of time when I'm not working, and hopefully one day I'll throw my hat in the ring as well in terms of actually producing a TTRPG system. So we'll see, and hopefully I'll get a chat with Mark some more one-on-one before that happens, so I can glean some wisdom and some guidance.
I can give you my first piece of wisdom is that if you're not a spellcaster, especially, you may be tempted when you're told that you have 3 actions per turn and you can use them all to attack, but try to find something else to do so that you don't use them all to attack, because you take increasing penalties.
I've played Pathfinder 2 some.
Okay, well then it's the same situation then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I got a comment on my channel today. This is a sort of shifting gears, but it's a segue, which was, what would you do if you were, calling the shots at Wizards of the Coast? How would you handle the way things are with D&D? And I know what I would respond with, and I don't know if I'm going to respond to that comment or maybe even make a video about it. Do you guys know how you would answer that?
Oh, I would tank the brand with my decision.
You would just take it?
Oh, okay. I mean, not on purpose. It's just that Derek knows that his ideas would not be popular. I can tell you, if Derek was in charge of D&D, despite the fact that 2024 just came out, he would immediately start creating like a 7th edition, a 6th edition. You decide what it was.
6th edition.
Because 2024 is kind of a 6th edition, so maybe the other one is 7. Whatever it is, we would call it the Melinda edition. And it would be totally different than 5e and not even use remotely similar mechanics, so that it would be able to express different things.
I respect the history. I mean, I've played every version of D&D. And I respect that there's a lineage there that if you go too far from it, people say it's not D&D. I mean, I don't think 4th edition went too far from D&D, and people said that wasn't D&D. And I love 4th edition. I love 3rd edition.
I played a lot of 4e.
Yeah. So
I played a ton of 3e and a ton of 4e.
Yeah. So, I started, with 1st and 2nd edition basic, and then played 3rd edition through its entire life cycle, 4th edition for its entire life cycle. And 5th edition was the 1st edition that I was kind of like, there's other games, and I don't need to keep playing the D20 versus a DC modifier. So I respect that those elements are in D&D and we shouldn't change them. My issue with the current version of D&D is I wonder, is that game meeting the needs of the vast majority of people who are playing that game? And I sometimes wonder if it's not. And I mean, a lot of people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with hacking your game or changing your game, and I respect that. But I also think that if everyone is taking your product and then immediately not using it for the intended purpose, what are we doing here? And so, I think that, but I also know that a lot of the changes that I think people would appreciate about D&D, people would have a heart attack about. Like, I think a lot of people are using D&D to basically sort of do improv-based storytelling with fights. And I don't necessarily know that D&D as a system has any sort of mechanical elements to support that style of play. But I think if you put those elements into the game, I think people paradoxically would have a real problem with it.
So
and I think a lot of people
the
argue
reason
that,
why and the resolution to the paradox, and we've talked about this on this channel before, is that D&D's actual goal is not to do that storytelling thing, and it's not to just only fight and murder simulate inside of a cavern, but it is instead, its goal is to be the game that dominates the market and and crush it like a kudzu that kind of, you know, is there, and it's very, very, anybody can find it, it's very rampant, and it crushes other things out by being a big tent that anyone can feel like they can be in there. From Magical Tea Party to Murder Simulator. Do both Magical Tea Party and Murder Simulator have to mod the game a little bit to have their best life? They both do. The Tea Party are kind of just using a little bit of a few pages of advice and ignoring a lot of other stuff and improvising. The Murder Simulator people probably have to, you know, mod and adjust the game rules, try to rebalance things if that's the kind of thing they care about, or what have you. And I'm using very extreme names for these two sides to indicate they're...
No, but I think you're doing a good job
in
of
entirely different games. And so
Yeah.
that is what D&D is really trying to do, and it's succeeding at that goal.
Yeah.
And Derek, if you try to target one of those groups and make the game vibrant and better for them in a way that they don't even need to house roll, the people who will be mad, it's not paradoxical. It's the Tea Party people. If you make things for them, they'll be like Derek Melinda is the savior who saved D&D. But they won't say that very often because they'll make feel like it's brown nosing. But who you will hear from are the people on the other side who are like, Derek has turned D&D into not D&D anymore. Now it's Magical Tea Parties. And he's ruined it, and that's the issue. Because what is D&D for these different groups at the vast edges of these tents is a mutually exclusive proposition that doesn't meet anywhere in the middle, really.
But how did we get there? Because Dungeons and Dragons was a game about fucking dungeons and fucking dragons. In fact, I remember that when 3rd edition came out,
for bards especially.
Yeah, for 3rd edition, they had this big whole like philosophy. It was like, back to the dungeon. Let's get back to the dungeon. And anybody who's ever read the freaking books knows that, I don't know what, 80% of the book in the form of classes, rules, spells is about fighting. It's about combat. And so this idea that the game can be used for anything is mind-boggling to me. It's like saying that I could use my chess set to play Battleship. I mean, yeah, maybe I can, but like, what are we even doing here? So that's where I'm always
they shifted gears from having writers and artists creating something that made a statement and pioneered into a corporate sludge flow that just wants to make money and follow the masses.
Yeah. But like what?
Which is why they'll whore their game out to any IP.
Right. Which is true.
The only reason we don't have Spider-Man D&D yet is they just haven't got the rights for it yet.
Right. Well, they had
like
it
Magic got him.
Magic.
Yeah, Magic got him.
Yeah, well,
as soon as D&D gets it,
like,
we'll
to
have
be
it.
clear, the Magic set for like Final Fantasy is supposedly, a lot of people have said, just very well designed. In addition,
it's one of the best. It's one of the
Fantasy.
best. If the cards didn't have Sephiroth and Claude on them, it was one of the best designed limited environments. At least for, I can't speak to constructed, but it was one of the best designed limited environments of all time.
Right.
Spider-Man as a draft experience is shit. So,
this is a
That's
example.
unfortunate. His draft and sealed are my favorites.
right. That's all I really play these days.
Going back to our previous conversation, though, this is an example of when we talk about the nostalgia bait, and some of it was good and some of it was bad. Same is true for these IP baits.
The only way we got nostalgia to begin with is because there were actual writers and artists making things with meaning and value that won people's hearts. So now it's just we have, and this isn't just D&D. This is like culture and media in general. Now we have corporations essentially putting their maggots over the cadavers of our myths and they're just cannibalizing our myths for fun and profit.
We just kind of have the undead of all of the boomers nostalgia that is just being puppeted around like zombies and continuing forever, in the same way that, like, if you look at holiday songs and it's just like they've frozen in time and maybe a few new ones have been added on, but whatever boomers were listening to when they were growing up, there still are like a high percentage of
but the holiday
songs
don't get cannibalized. They just get
they just get regurgitated.
They're sustaining, I would say.
Yes. No, that's fair.
They're
Well, no,
sustained.
but I
Yeah.
think Mark has an interesting point, right? Like a lot of the songs that we associate as being a holiday Christmas classic, you know, they were new at some point. Like they came out
Right.
like in the 50s or in the 40s, and it was just. But then it's like, but
Right.
what are
Yeah,
the
that was my point. The only reason
what are
that we
the-
have nostalgia is because originally someone with a meaningful, creative work made something that was new and pioneering, and it won
Right.
people's hearts.
So
So
then
that's what I would do if I was at the helm of D&D.
But but is the
I
problem
would.
with the creators or is it the problem with the audience? Because is the problem that we
There's
don't
problems
have
on both sides.
Okay,
Yeah,
because-
I would not pin the problem, quote unquote, on wizards or on the consumers. It's an everybody issue. But if it
I
were
would
me,
say-
I would start a new campaign setting. I don't think we necessarily need a new edition, but I would start a new campaign setting that is a discrete setting. It's not part of the multiverse sludge flow. You don't jump from this setting to Ravenloft, to Eberron, to SpongeBob SquarePants, to Rick and Morty, to Ravnica. It's just its own cosmology. There's not infinite timelines. Everyone's playing for keeps. And I would hire highly talented, creative artists and writers with real skill who actually have something to say to make a setting and to make characters. It's absolutely mind-blowing that D&D is so big, but there aren't like characters that people care about and love. Like, who do we love in D&D?
Well, but that's another-
Drizzt?
well, that's another
That's
example.
like 20,
You-
30 years ago, we
you've got
loved
these,
Drizzt.
right? You've got these books, and they're like Mordenkainen, and I'm like, what does that name mean to any of you?
yeah.
Do any of you know what the Circle of Eight is? Hell, your game is now based in the Forgotten Realms. It's not even based at Greyhawk. So what do you know about O-Earth? And what do you know about Mordenkainen? And Mordenkainen
He has cheeky little quips quoted in sidebars in
you know,
some pages.
and Tasha and Mordenkainen and all the original Circle of Eight and all these people that were from like Gary Gygax's home campaign. And I'm like,
right.
how is that nostalgia for the the 32-year-old gamer who started playing in 2015?
Yeah, they are cannibalizing culture and myth.
Well,
So
creating
they're-
characters is really important, and that's why Planeswalkers got added to Magic. Because for a while there were these stories, and you could sort of see if you were really Vorthos and into the lore, you could be like, "Oh yeah, this is where Urza and Mishra were fighting, and they went to this thing, and then they met these people, and hey, there are cards for them as well." But most people didn't get it, and I think that if I remember correctly, what happened was that Magic was trying to have like a movie or some other things optioned, and then they were just like, "You don't have characters, you can't."
Right.
And then that's when they realized they needed to add Planeswalkers, like
Right.
as
Which
a
is funny.
rules element.
Because the last year or two, three, they basically haven't printed any Planeswalkers. And you know why? Because Planeswalkers don't work well in Commander. And Commander is what sells. So now the focus has been on making infinite legends, right? Creatures that are legends, because that's what your Commander can be. And so it's an example of where they were like, well, this is what people are playing, so that's this is what we gotta.
But they still did create the Planeswalkers, and it did give them more characters, like Esper was talking about. I think in terms of like what is at fault for this perpetuating cycle, like it's everything, right? But I would say that the audience and like the executives, the money decision making people are like the main. Because we were talking before, the question was the economy is it the creators or the audience? I would say the creators are generally like almost potentially in a hostage situation to the audience and the money making executives, right? They don't have a choice, like, and I've even been in situations before that were not about this.
Either side could solve the issue. Either side could solve it. Either side could solve it. So the consumers could solve it by, we just don't buy this anymore.
Right.
Do not give your money to this. And if they do make something that has like artistic value and meaning and depth and is well produced, then do give them your money. Don't that. I think that's another problem, is that the consumers sometimes get too hardcore with their backlash, and they're just like, screw these guys, I'm never giving my money again. Like, well, like, would you give them your money again if they amended their wrongs and did something amazing? Like, shouldn't they be rewarded if they do correct things? Because otherwise, then what's the incentive?
I am
The
very
incentive
with
for
you on that.
anyone?
I think that
What's the incentive for anyone to get better? The corporation could also solve the problem by, you know, taking an artistic risk and creating something with great craftsmanship to it, that I think people would be happy to buy those products.
But I think that the issue is that the creators themselves don't have the ability to take that risk, right? It has to be the upper corporate people, or you, like you said, you could do something with the community. But you're right. Modern day boycotts often come to like a decent percentage of people are just kind of in it to the point where they don't understand that the other end of it is you are supposed to go back if they meet your demands, or if they meet whatever you ask them to do. And I try to always make sure that if I'm boycotting, that I always go back and I support, even if the people who I was boycotting are still imperfect, but they did if I said I'm not doing it until you do the thing I asked for, then I need to come back when they do the thing I asked for.
Right. Yeah, it really comes down to, and this is kind of philosophical or maybe even religious, it comes down to, is your you know, you as the individual consumer or the individual citizen, is your behavior driven by hatred or not? Because if you're just saying, I'm going to just boycott your company because I want you all to just crash and burn and die, and I'm never going to support you ever again in my entire life, like that's some straight up hatred stuff right there. Like, don't you want people to improve, to get better? You want like your fellow human beings to like lose their jobs and get like ridiculed and exiled forever? Like that's pretty terrible. But if it's out of love, love can be kind of harsh sometimes, where it's like, hey, you're screwing up. Like, you got to kind of smack some sense into them. But then kind of like the child who misbehaves and then they do good next time, you got to like reward the child, right? You got to be like, thank you, you did good. Like, praise them or give them a lollipop or at least or something. So,
right? Even if you don't think of them as a child, like think of
that's just the first analogy I thought of.
Sure. But I'm not saying because it's demeaning. I'm just saying if you think of the business as a cold, cruel, reptilian thing that is not something that you have a warm fuzzy for, but it's just going to make calculated decisions, and it does something awful, and you get a bunch of people to stop using them and say, stop doing this awful thing. We liked your old product, but we're not going to use it because of the awful thing you're doing. And then they stop. Presumably they wanted to do the awful thing because it saved them a few dollars or something like that. If they stop, but then you don't come back, then they're going to be like, oh, I guess we should go back to doing the awful thing because apparently we've lost these guys because we did it in the first place. That's not great. But we're not going to get them back even if we stop. Now, so what's like, the point?
Oh, we shouldn't do that thing because it pisses off our core gamers, but we can't do this other thing now because the core is not going to buy it anymore. So we just have to do this very mediocre, super broadly applicable nothing burger.
One, and so did we.
Yeah, it's like it just becomes this sort of generic commodity that you can use for either magical tea party or murder simulation.
But I mean, you know, the good news is you don't have to buy an adventure from Wizards of the Coast. You could buy an adventure from Roll for Combat or from Esper the Bard. So, you know.
Well, I did back Roll for Combat's Kickstarter, and I look forward to getting that book. And I have not been spending any money on Wizards of the Coast for it's probably a year now, year and a half. Like, I made a public statement. I am not supporting them financially. Could they make corrections and win me back? Sure. I would love for them to do that. I would hope that they would say, all right, guys, like, we tried out these things with the last edition, or even doesn't have to be a new edition. Could just be with our last phase that we did. Some of it worked out, some of it didn't work out. We learned some things. Here's this new thing that we're going to try now, and this is why we think it's good, and it's going to actually uphold the promises that we made to you all at the outset of 5th edition, which is we are going to support all the generations of gamers and provide settings and content that fit all the different styles of fantasy so that everyone can play the game they want to play and actually fulfill that promise. Then I would what would I say? I would appreciate that, and I would vocalize that appreciation, and I would buy it, presuming it was good.
So, like,
But
while I completely support people like you who you don't like the products that are coming out, so you don't buy them. That's, in fact, that's the best thing to do. I would caution anyone who's watching this who is still boycotting Wizards because of the OGL thing. This is an example of what I was talking about before. They did go back on the bad OGL thing. They didn't do it. They switched to a Creative Commons that is a good license. So if you actually love the books that they're putting out at this point, but you're still not buying them anyway because of the OGL, I urge you to reconsider and to consider that boycott should be over because they did change their ways.
Yeah. I didn't start boycotting from the OGL. Now, it probably was one of the straws that eventually broke the camel's back, but that wasn't. I would say it was just kind of a death of 1,000 cuts in my case. And I think it really hit home when the 2024 books came out, which there are parts of those that I do really like. There are parts that I think are good. Like, you guys made the game better in these areas with these new books, but I also think there's other parts that they just kind of remixed things. They just kind of shuffled the cards around and like, okay, that wasn't broken before, and the new thing isn't any better. It just is different. And then there's a bunch of other things that I am very disappointed with, and I find them very bothersome and annoying. Like, the monsters don't have lore anymore. Like, they've just essentially evaporated all the lore. Like,
there's a new monster manual because everything else they did in there was
there's basically
good.
no lore in it.
I liked that
There's
book
no
other
more
than
lore.
losing the
There's
lore.
no more orcs. There's no more drow. Like this. Here you go.
Oh, we had a super chat. Venture Agent Dayrail said Hasbro keeps trying to make D&D and Magic into a recurring spending machine via Sigil, Arena, OGL. They only care about money. They're stuck in a cycle. WotC is stuck in a cycle of Hasbro's making.
Well, the interesting thing is that if a business produces a product or content or whatever it is, if the business produces something that is of quality, that provides value, a lot of value to the customer, that wins our hearts, then we're glad to give them the money, and they do reap the financial rewards, and deservingly so. There's nothing wrong in and of itself with wanting to be successful. Everybody wants to be successful, whether it's a business or me or you. We all want to be successful. We want to, in our work and our jobs that we have. We all want to be successful. We all want to succeed and do well and benefit financially. That in of itself is not bad. What's bad is when the profit gets enthroned like a god above everything else, above quality, above respecting the lineage of the game, above the art, above the writing, like above everything else. It's just the dogged drive for profit margins for the shareholders.
Well, outside of
it's not money's the root of all evil. It's the love of money.
But outside of the whole, it's the fiduciary responsibility of a corporation to make money for shareholders. In theory, capitalism money is just a reflection of people choosing to engage with a quality product. And this is where I kind of say, maybe Hasbro isn't as evil as y'all say, because there are certain problematic situations which can exist in a world driven by capitalism. We see this a lot, obviously, in our current situation. where there is a product that is needed, that is required for people to live, and that product is being hyper monetized. Or there's a product there where there is no legitimate competition, right? Walmart drove out all the mom and pop stores, and you don't have a choice but to go to Walmart. RPGs are not that. The shelf behind me is testament to the fact that if you want to play a different game, if you want to engage in the role-playing game hobby, you could do so very easily, easier than it's ever been possible. And you don't have to give Wizards of the Coast a dime. So the
Wizards is fine with that. Like, they have a free SRD with plenty of content in there.
Right. So the fact that people are
fun. That's great.
The fact that people are choosing to continue to fork over money to this corporation, to me, is more reflective of the audience and the consumer than it is any sort of evil or misgiving from behalf of the corporation. Because if people are choosing to engage still with purchases of money, that is a voluntary choice at that point. Because as you said, the SRD is free. Everything else is pretty much in Creative Commons. There's, I don't know, 1,000 new RPG systems coming out a year. So, yeah, at this point, you have so many options. But yet people continue to give them money. So,
somehow,
yeah,
that's my somehow thing. Like, why are people supporting? I don't know how else to phrase it. Why are people monetarily supporting the abuse and exploitation of their mythology? It blows me away. Yeah. I think it's something that,
right
now, this is very speculative, but I think in the future people will look back in time and be like, wow, this era of human civilization had this mythology that was so meaningful to people, but then they destroyed it themselves. And it'll be like a curious, like, that's the YouTube video of the year 3000. It's like the curious case of the mythology of the rise and fall of the Star Wars mythology. And maybe we just can't see it in the moment, but in retrospect later, people will be like,
well, I think the other thing,
strange, like,
the other thing,
a virus took over or something and killed itself.
Well, I think that's the other thing to remember too, is that I'm making this number up. 95% of the people who if asked, are you a D&D player? Do you play D&D 5e? They said yes. 95% of the people who play D&D don't know what the OGL is, have never heard of a Pinkerton. They have no clue about, you know what I mean? Like, they don't care, and they're not tied into it.
They may have heard of Pathfinder, maybe.
Yeah.
And possibly not any other TTRPG.
Correct.
Are you saying that we are mega geeks, Derek?
Yes, I am.
Yes. But I want to tie into what Esper was saying for a moment about, like, how we're in a curious time because of these weird things that are, like, dredging up your myths and just messing around with them. I think that that's human nature, and we're seeing it because we're here right now. Like, if you even go back to ancient Greece, and you would see, I mean, we have surviving plays by Euripides, who would just do whatever the heck he wanted to, stories that were not usually going the way that he made them go, to the point that some of his contemporary critics thought that what he was doing was awful and were screwing up the myth. They all thought he was a hack. He's one of the most famous tragedians because we have more of his surviving plays than some of the other people from back then. But we actually have an Aristophanes play where Heracles goes to the underworld to try to find Aeschylus and bring him back. And he can't find him. And then Euripides is there and is like, bring me, I'm Euripides. And he's like, no. And he just leaves him there. Because, like, just even if
you're
you
the
just
50 Shades of Grey of ancient Greece.
Right, yeah. No, like, if you look at some of those myths.
Culture always needs new ideas. We need new energy to come in and maybe remix things a bit. Otherwise, we stagnate. And so there's this perpetual interplay between, we could say, order and chaos, right? This perpetual dance between preserving the tradition and bringing in new ideas. And they both have valid functions, right? We need both those things, because you need the stability of tradition and what you know. You need the known world. You need what is proven and what works. But you also need people that are visionary and can think up new ideas and solutions to new problems, and yeah, to keep it alive, right? To keep it like a living organism. It needs new input and new stimuli. The problem is when it gets too out of balance one way or the other. I would argue we are currently in a time where we've gone too far with the remixing and the dredging and the tampering around, and it's sort of a cannibalizing effect.
I would say that Derek is not wrong that the audience is part of what makes that, though, because I have certainly we live in an era where there's so much in terms of every type of media. So we can't say that there aren't people out there trying to make the next new thing that have a passionate vision that they want to share with the world. But we're not hearing it. It's not getting out there. It's being drowned out by the next...
Yeah, there's a lot.
It's by the next big nostalgia thing that automatically gets some amount of our brain space because we know the brand from the nostalgia. And we're probably missing one or two very artistic things that just went under the radar and no one saw.
Right.
And the companies are seeing that, and they're like, well, we tried to back this thing and nobody did it. But when we made Indiana Jones, we have rated Harrison Ford for an AI duplicate because he refuses to do it now. And the Even Laster Crusade, and it did badly, but that's only because we spent a lot of money on it the last time. So this time we did it for cheap, and it still did okay. And then that's what we should do.
Right, and I don't want to dredge up this dead horse, but Critical Role started a game company called Darrington Press, and Darrington Press released a fantasy game. Which was, they didn't design it obviously, but they own the company that did design it, and they said, hey, we want you guys to create a really cool fantasy game and do things and have a very narrative type game that can really tell the kind of stories that we love here at Critical Role. And they did that, and it sold out everywhere around the world. And I talked to the Darrington Press people, and they were like, yeah, it sold 1,000 times better than we thought it was. And then they
heard Matt Mercer say that in his interview with Professor DM, that it sold 1,000 times better. But I assume that was hyperbole.
Yeah, it is a bit hyperbole. And then they played D&D for their next campaign. So,
yeah, that's a smart move, though.
No, we right. See that? Yeah. Why is that a smart move?
We've said on this channel that we thought,
I'm saying, they could have taken a risk. They could have taken a risk. They could have been bold.
They did take risks. If they would have also switched over to Daggerheart, they would have taken an excessive risk.
That's it. But my point is just like, if people are watching Critical Role and they go, they created their own game system and they didn't play it, why should I? And so, I think that I don't personally care whether they played it or not. I don't watch Critical Role regardless. And I don't need them to play it in order to like the game. I'm simply saying that there's a sort of self-perpetuating problem. Let's take us. Right? Not me, but like influencers who I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of them over the last couple of years because of conventions and because of my connection to Roll for Combat and Steven, is like, they're basically like, well, I could talk about not D&D, but then I would get 0 views and I would make no money. And so I could do an adventure for Fabula Ultima, but I would, I'd be lucky if I made $5,000 on the Kickstarter. So they just talk about what's good for them. And that in turn, when people go onto the internet, they say, oh, hey, look, the only thing that there is content for is 5e D&D. And so it's not just a WotC problem. It's not just a Hasbro problem. It is a systemic problem that everybody who's got their hand in the cookie jar is sort of complicit in. And
what we need is like the one hero to rise up and unite all of the barbarian tribes that are like disparate, spread out across the world, and like get like the indie world to turn into this colossus to stand up to the other colossus.
Well, everybody wants to be that in not just in
Yeah.
role-playing games, but in every different thing. Everyone wants to. We're going to be the next Star Wars, right? Or the next whatever.
I think in everybody's like daydream fantasy, they want to be that. In reality, they don't.
In reality, it would be awful. How stressful would that be?
Right. And that's
why you'd have to sacrifice your entire life to do that.
And that's why you should play more dungeons, because
We got into this whole side conversation
because in the dungeon,
the way civilization has been toxified by dredging up our myths and
Psych. This was all a meta example of, remember how I talked about how dungeons are great because they provide structure and you can't go to rooms that aren't there? Well, this is an example of what happened right now, is an example of, say, a city adventure or an urban adventure or a wilderness adventure where the players just go everywhere and suddenly you're at a pulling thing. You're like, what are we even doing? No. This adventure was supposed to be about the cult of the evil snake god. Well, if you had just put them into a dungeon that represented the cult of the snake god's caverns of the serpent, then you would have been totally fine because the players couldn't have gone into the chamber of tangents and they couldn't have gone into the hallway of corporate capitalism. They would have been stuck fighting the monsters, learning about the secrets of this cult, and trying to overthrow them before they perform their hideous ritual. So, see? Lesson learned. Man. See, for all those people, you guys aren't... No, we were just proving a point. We were just proving a point. But yeah.
I like to say traction. The word I often use is traction. If you have a very well-built, well-crafted dungeon, it provides traction. That means people suddenly have something focused to talk about. It unifies people together, and you're now engaged with something that you can actually focus on. There's like a clarity. You can actually see, oh, this is what we're doing. We're doing this thing. It doesn't have to be hyper-focused to where it's too narrow that it's boring. But everyone comes together with a unification effect, and it's like, oh, now we know what we're doing. We know why it matters. We have come up against these challenges and are finding ways to overcome them. That stimulates us, gives us something to talk about. So I love that about the dungeon experience. That's what the game is intended to do. Dungeons
I definitely think that.
and dragons. It's literally what the name is.
I think 5e D&D, I actually think, for the most part, is actually a pretty good dungeon crawler.
It's fantastic.
And the reason I say that is because the core assumptions that the game is based around work particularly well if you are in a dungeon.
Yeah, it is assuming that you're in a dungeon going against multiple challenges.
Correct.
And the characters get like stress tested.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, and I get it, but like if you're doing a more, I don't know what to describe it, but like a more story-based adventure where it's like, okay, the party has to travel to the nearby bandit camp. Along the way, there's an ambush. And then 2 days later, they're attacked by griffins. And then the following day, while, treating with the druids, they're attacked by wargs. Well, what you've just described is 3 encounters over the course of 7 days. And thus, every one of those encounters will have been precipitated by a long rest. All the spellcasters will have all their spell slots. They'll have all their hit dice. And each fight won't really matter unless it could threaten to potentially kill the players. Because if it doesn't kill them, they'll just heal to full after the fight. And it won't matter because they'll have a long rest before their next encounter. So essentially,
then why even have a random encounter if it's that
why even have
that it could kill them? Right.
Correct. Yeah. So the idea of 5th edition is, as stated in the game, this idea of 5 to 8 encounters over the course of a day. Short rests, and the classes that break short rests, like warlocks or whatever, and by the way, I don't know shit about 5th edition, and even I know this, is because getting an hour to short rest in a dungeon is a luxury that you often can't and don't have, especially if you're using some sort of random encounter type mechanic. If you break up the game to the way that it is structured to be played, it actually works pretty damn well.
Yep, that's why I made Gauntlet Runner, because it actually follows all of that, and it puts the characters in a focused, condensed, dynamic environment where it's playing to the strengths of 5e. It's taking what 5e was intended to do, or what it was intended to do the best, and focusing on that and just making it as strong and stylish as possible.
Because I contend, and I still...
Because if you get infinite short rests, which is what a lot of DMs unfortunately end up doing, because they don't know any better. It's like, why couldn't they just be in this room and like guarding the doors and stand there for an hour, right? I've seen it more times I could possibly count. The short rests are just kind of infinite, and it ruins the whole game.
Absolutely. But also on top of that, right, where you have literally one encounter per day between long rests. Well, yeah, casters are going to be very supremacist or very supreme if they literally never have a resource drain. That's not the way that they, I mean, you could argue that that's not a great way to design a game with this high disparity of power between characters who are really good when you only fight 1 or 2 encounters a day versus characters.
I will argue that. That's not
argue
great
that it's
because
not great?
you know, even if you expect that you're gonna have 20 encounters or whatever high number Merle's recently said in an interview, I think it may have been 20 rounds. Even if you expect that that's the average, you know that sometimes it's gonna have 1 or 2 encounters, and the game needs to be tested in those cases as well.
Yeah, which right. So, but that is the way.
And you come up on weird things where it's like, oh, the spellcasters, you know, right before their long rest, they like burn out all their spell slots. Like, okay, I made all these good berries that are like extra charged up, and I'm going to put all these heals and buffs on everyone because they're going to have this long duration. Now my long rest triggers, and I've got it all back again. It's
absolutely.
It's very odd.
So I mean, you could take cues from other RPGs that do something about this and bring them into D&D. I mean, I know people often make fun of that and are like, "Why don't you just play the other system?" But some people want to play D&D. So
which is
you could
take D&D's awesome, but you know, like,
you could take.
I love D&D.
The ideas from, like, for instance, both Daggerheart and Fabula Ultima. Every time you rest, the GM gets to do something. In the case of Daggerheart, they're going to get some more fear. In the case of Fabula Ultima, they're going to advance their like what the villain is doing, and they'll show a villain scene, and something is going to happen when you choose to rest. So there's a consequence because your rest is narratively advancing the plot. And maybe you could make your own version of 5e where it's like you can rest for the night. That won't necessarily advance the villain's plans. You don't get a long rest unless you're willing to advance the villain's plans.
Well, I think
so. That way you could have the 2-day journey, but
that.
not guarantee that it gives the spells back unless the players chose to do to take the option that was the long rest that did that.
Well, I think there's a lot of things about 5th edition though that, you know, again, in my personal opinion, and from what I understand of its development, right? And I participated in the D&D Next playtest when it was going on, and I remember going.
That was a cool playtest.
I did it at the very beginning. Did you guys do it at the very beginning?
I did it before Monty Cook. I did it before Monty Cook got attached to the project. I did it while Monty Cook was attached to the project, and then when Monty Cook got removed from the project, I stopped playtesting it because they started kind of abandoning the whole idea of the original like super hyper modularity component of the design. And
I liked the modularity at the beginning, and you know what I really liked that was in the early thing, where the odd modifier or the odd ability scores gave you a thing that you could just reliably do based on that, and just like once you have this odd number, you can now do these things without rolling.
Yeah,
and once you have the even number, your modifier goes
this
up.
DC or lower. Yeah,
it made there be a value to both aspects of the ability score, and I was like, that's so cool. That's a great idea.
Yep.
But in my opinion, 5e is an OSR game. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but, you know, 4th edition, in my opinion, was very, you know, obviously very modern, push forward, hyper gamist. And, you know, the audience, by and large, did not engage with the game as well as they'd liked it to. And so by that time, 5th edition was being developed, the development team was very scratch. And I feel like it was sort of an homage. It was kind of a mea culpa. It was kind of a, hey, to all of those players who grew up in the 80s and the 90s playing D&D, who maybe, you know, love 3rd edition or 2nd edition and kind of, you know, feel like we lost our way with all like the hyper glitz and glamour and the anime over the top video game style of 4th edition. Here's 5th edition D&D. It's very old school coded. It's a lot of, you know, paragraphs and natural language, and why use headers and keywords and like a very, you know, structured gamist design. It's very just like, you know, no, we're not having magic item markets. We're not going to give you magic item creation formulas. We're not going to give you, you know, precise prices for magical items. We're going to go back to that old school flavor and feel. And I think they did that. And by the way, here's chalk. Here's 10-foot pole. here's, pitons in the equipment list.
Yeah.
Let's bring all that.
Essentially the original dungeon crawling gear.
Yeah, all the original dungeon crawling gear. And they said, here you go. Here's Dungeons and Dragons the way you remember it, with a couple of quality life improvements to make the game run a little bit smoother. And, the classes aren't going to be super complicated, not 55 feats with 700 magic items, just a couple cool magical items, +1 flaming sword, a bottle of air, and a cloak of invisibility. That's your character, a couple of class features, and you're on your way. And that's what 5th edition really is. And I think the problem is that people take it from that aspect and they try to play it in other areas. And that's where I do think the problems present themselves, because if you do put it into a dungeon, I think it plays really well. And to the point about the short rest and the long rest, all of those things were technically issues back in 1979 as well. The issue is that we had things at that time, most notably random encounters, which were designed to provide this immediate time pressure on your players. The longer the players took, the more likely they were to be attacked by, orcs or gnolls in the middle of the night. And, the idea of spending an hour in the dungeon might mean that the GM is going to make 2 or 3 random encounter rolls, which potentially could attack you, thus rooting the whole point of you resting. And we've removed those things from the game, but we've kept the resting elements. And so it's not surprising to me that some of those things have become out of whack.
I think one of the tricky things for a lot of GMs in 5e, Derek, and to your point on that, is that because of the fact that the game doesn't automatically put some of these things in, now a GM can do it. Like Esper said, he does it, and I know. Because I've had him as a GM, and he will respectfully push back if you're trying to do something that the game rules probably might allow, but that it might not make sense, or to make things more fun or more interesting. He's very good at doing that. Not everybody is, though. And one of the weaknesses of 5e is that if you think, I've talked about this before, of the analogy of your table is like almost like a family where the GM and the game system are the parents and everybody else are the kids. And one of them wants to be the cool parent. 5e wants to be the cool parent where it tells you can just do things, and the GM actually has to be the strict one who's like, no, you can't do that right now. I promise it's for your own good. You're going to have more fun this way. I know eating all the sugar or doing all your short rests every single time, it sounds like that's good. It'll get your stuff back, but I think it's going to be more fun in the long term, the way we can have the challenges work. If you trust me on this, and you can't do that. Whereas there are other systems, and like to contrast, Pathfinder 2, specifically, some of the things I put in there, I wanted the GM to be able to be the cool parent, and the system to be the strict one that was like, by default, you can't get this uncommon stuff automatically. You have to ask your GM, and they might allow you to. And some GMs are like, I always allow my players to do that. Ha! Take that, system. And I'm like, why are you saying take that? I'm glad. I'm so glad you do that. Your players probably are thrilled. They probably think you're a cool guy because you always let them use the uncommon options and you're comfortable with that. That's great. I want them to like you and think that the game was the one that was putting in the restriction. And I also want them to blame the game and not the GM. If a GM is like, no, you can't have that uncommon thing just yet. Maybe we'll find a way for it later. They'd be like, well, it does say that in the book. As opposed to the book just saying you can have everything, and then Derek is your GM, or Esper or me, and we're like, no, you can't have this. And they're like, why not? The book says I can have everything. So I don't know. That's a sort of a philosophy thing that
book says I can
this.
drink potions as a bonus action and doesn't provoke an op attack. Okay, guess we're doing that now. I don't want to be the bad parent. I don't want to be the bad guy.
That's an interesting way of viewing it as the good parent and the bad parent.
Yeah, the cool one and the strict one and the mean one. Like, I don't know. It's one way that I think of things. And I think that, like, Esper is really good at being strict when necessary in a way that makes it work. And he knows where to draw the line and when to do so. And I've seen it with multiple players in the second one, or with me in the first one, at certain times where I didn't quite understand his house rules or how the VTT were working, and he explained it to me and got it working in. But some GMs, they don't want to do that. They're just like, okay, sure. And they just say yes when the players are going onward. And actually, 5e makes that sometimes a little harder for them because it's already so permissive that they could wind up getting steamrolled.
Yeah, in general has kind of a permissive or even pandering tone to it, which can run contrary to a more like gritty style of game, or a more like, oh, this is more of a old school inspired dungeon experience where it is supposed to be deadly and you got to use your wits. You can't just, hit your same like MMORPG power combo every single encounter and just win every time. Like, no, if you don't change up your tactics in certain areas, it's gonna be much more perilous. By the way, circling back to the rest thing, what I do is I gamify the rests. You have to find a way to have that luxury. If you're in a dungeon, there's something like in Gauntlet Runner, you have to find a sanctuary, and it may be like, okay, there's just like a little bit of lore, and as long as you know the right marking, you can identify, oh, this is a sanctuary. Or maybe you have to do something like you have to find the red candle and light the red candle in this chamber, and while the candle burns, it works as a sanctuary. Or I had this temple called the Shadow Temple in one of my campaigns, where they had to figure out the right sequence to ring these long suspended bells in this hall of bells, and it made for this really atmospheric puzzle. And they figured out the right bell sequence, and I played one of my favorite ambient tracks, Movement 9 by Vangelis, which is very ominous, dark ambient track. And I play that, and the bells are just droning out. And I'm like, the drones of the bells drive off the undead shadows and the wraiths for as long as they remain ringing for I don't remember if it was a short rest or a long rest in that dungeon. But the sense of you can't just take a rest anywhere. Like, you got to get past the skill challenge and the thing in the lake and find the tomb of Balin. Then you can take your short rest in the tomb of Balin, and you only get it for that hour, because then the next minions of doom are going to become beaten down the door.
And they brought a cave troll.
And they brought a cave troll. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's things like this that engage the players, it makes them pay attention,
Yeah.
it keeps them on the edge of their seat. And if they win, they're like, like we actually achieved something. And if they die, it's like, oh, wow, like went down in a blaze of glory doing something that like had like your heart pumping.
So achieve to get a rest is parallel to the thing we were talking about before, whereas rest and the GM gets something, or some, bad plots events too. One of the reasons
cool.
I
Those
like to
cool
have
ideas.
access to both in my quiver, and possibly do something like, if you did that achievement, if you did those special things like Esper was saying, maybe you get a rest that's free. Whereas if you don't, then these other things happen, is that if you only you have to achieve to rest, you can wind up getting into a death spiral or a bad situation where it's like, you're in too bad of a shape to achieve the thing that you need to achieve, and therefore you can't rest to get out of that shape. And that can be a concern, or unless it's actually, when Gauntlet Runner, it's actually kind of a feature. It's like, yep, you sure were in a death spiral, you lose. Like, that's an acceptable state.
Mythic Doom. That's the genre of Gauntlet Runner. Mythic Doom.
Or you take like the Daggerheart and Fabulous Ultima approach, right? Which is where players can't die. They can,
unless they want to.
Well, unless they want to, but you can lose. But death is a choice. That doesn't mean that the game...
Really.
Oh yeah. Oh, you didn't know
but
that.
But if you don't choose to die,
so you said it was narrative driven.
Yeah.
So this is making me think. Okay.
So you get taken to
the players
0.
have narrative agency.
You get taken to 0, and then you get a choice. In Fabulous Ultima, it's 2 choices, and the choices are between either you go out in a blaze of glory, or you survived, but something like quite bad happens to you that the GM just decides what it is. You're definitely out of this fight. That's for freaking sure. But you're safe from being killed at the very least. But you may lose an important item that is needed for some.
Your hand gets cut off or something.
Absolutely. Anything could
be kidnapped, and you're not even going to come back for a while. And you may have to do like separate scenes with you in the place you were kidnapped to. Anything could have happened to you.
What if it's a gelatinous cube?
Well, then the GM would come up with something. I had like mindless zombies.
And by the way,
inside the gelatinous cube. but you
No.
don't die.
No, but so that is actually where people break, because they put themselves into this very simulationist corner.
Like they mentally break. Like
Yeah, they mentally break.
But
They
you could
just
be like,
have
the cube destroys your gear, right?
Right.
Like the GM has to come up with what it is. The cube dissolves your favorite sword. It's gone.
right.
That's
Because
an acceptable choice for Fabula Ultima.
Right. Because it's this idea of taking a resource, which we all know is bullshit and completely abstract, hit points, and somehow like directly connecting it with the amount of, I don't know, meat on your body and the amount of life force it is. Going to 0 hit points might not even mean that your character is unconscious. It just means that your character is out of the encounter and suffers from some sort of, loss. It can even be diegetically not connected, right? You might go to 0 against a battle against the bandits, and as part of that consequence, the other half of the bandit raiding force raids your village, so that when you do recover and head back home, you see the fires burning in the distance, and the GM chose to strike. He can't kill you because you chose not to die, but I can kill your loved ones.
So
I can burn down the.
So if the player chooses that my character is not going to die, the GM always has to do rocks fall, enemies die, or rocks fall, enemies
they don't
run
win
away.
the fight. That
they don't win the
character
fight.
in Fabula Ultima, that character is gone from the fight safely.
The party is swallowed
safe.
by the Tarask, but they all choose we don't want to die. So the GM has to say like,
"Yep,
a god."
Or you were all devoured by the
Tarask,
and there's a city inside of the Tarask, but also some of your gear was destroyed, or they come up with some way that things move on. Now in Daggerheart, it's actually, instead of the GM having to quite put up so many different ideas, it's a trichotomy with 3 options that are usually, I would say, simpler to adjudicate than Fabula Ultima, but therefore a little less flexible. One of them is also die and go out in the blaze of glory. That's still in there. There's the one that's most similar to the other one from Fabula Ultima is you're safe, but you have a lasting consequence where you can't even have as much hope anymore as you did before. But there's a third one that when Critical Role was doing Daggerheart for the first time, everybody picked, and the people watching really enjoyed, which is let the dice decide. And if the dice decide, you actually might come back into the fight and not die, come back in with a good number of hit points. But if they decide you're dead, you're just dead. You didn't go in a blaze of glory, you didn't do anything good or useful to help your team, you're dead. And it's close to a 50-50. It's a equal or higher on D12, so the equal is the only thing that makes it better than a 50-50 on that gamble.
So I want to address the trad people. I hesitate to call them grognards, but I'll call them the trad people in chat, which is a very common refrain, which is, what's the challenge if the players will always deny death of their PCs? Players have to learn death happens, otherwise why play? Ding, ding, ding. And you know what? You're absolutely correct. But you're making a core fallacy. And the fallacy is this, whether you agree it or not, is you are viewing D&D, or you're viewing TTRPGs, as what I call a campaign as competition. You are looking at the point of the game being it is a challenge, it is something to be overcome, it is something to beat, right? And in the effort to struggle against that competition or that challenge, a story emerges. The other way to view TTRPGs is the whole point of the system is to create stories, not challenge. There are, Magic the Gathering talks about the reason why people play games. And some people play games because they want to prove something. They want to prove something to themselves. They want to, I was good enough. Accomplishment. That feeling of I beat the game. I was smart enough. I made good choices. I played the right deck. I chose the right feats. We had the right party composition. I took Fireball today, or I cast Levitate, at the right time. And that's a very legitimate way to play TTRPGs. But there are other TTRPGs who do not buy into that fallacy. And they say, we're not sitting around this table to test our might, right? We're not here to see if we can be good enough to beat the game. We're here to tell a cool story. And the game's rules are here to service that goal, not the goal of, are you good enough to beat the game? And games like Fabula Ultima and Daggerheart are in service of that goal, not the goal of, are you good enough to win? And if you're not, the punishment is black screen, game over, you lose, TPK. And I think it's really funny because there's a lot of people out there.
You get to make a new character with one of the 1,000 splat books you bought.
Correct. And I think it's really funny because I've met a lot of people who have a really hard time grokking the idea of campaign is what I call collaboration, right? I call them campaign as competition and campaign as collaboration. And I meet a lot of people who have a really hard time understanding campaign as collaboration. And they're like, no, I'm in it for the challenge, and the players have to be good enough and they have to overcome it. And if they lose, it go to, fade to black, game over, continue, question mark. And then I find out that those GMs fudge a lot because they're like, well, the player can't die. They were low on hit points. I had to give them a rest. And it's so funny to me.
No fudges.
Yeah.
I do no fudges. Roll out in the open.
Roll in the open. We see dice go where they may.
People think I'm crazy.
Yep.
I have my players track my monster's hit points. So not only do I roll
that might be a smart move. Take a little bit of extra weight off of
it takes
everything you have to juggle.
Yeah. I do it for the cognitive load dissemination. And two, I think it's really awesome to have the player as almost this like quasi co-GM and being like, guys, this thing's not even under 100 yet. And it's like, no. It's like they're not hearing it from me. They're hearing it from a friend. It almost becomes worse.
So Derek, I'm gonna give a different answer to the same comment that you saw about where's the challenge. So as someone who enjoys all of the different aspects, and we talked about this before, all 5 of the Magic the Gathering styles or whatever, I think that they're asking the wrong question, or they have missed a little piece where they say, where's the challenge if the players will always deny death of their PCs? Because that is making an assumption, and that assumption is that even the player who is in it for a challenge and does want to win will always deny death for the PCs, which is also making the assumption that you as the GM have not been able to put something up there that is a stake that is painful enough to them that they would choose to die to defend it and choose to die to make it not happen. And when you're in these kind of games, look, okay, I haven't run as much Fabula Ultima as Derek, and in fact, none of my players actually have chosen to die yet. Several of them went to 0 because, especially since we found it to be way too easy if the enemies are randomly targeted, so we allowed them to target who they wanted to unless somebody was guardianing or forcing their targeting. We allowed them to play as if they had some kind of intelligence. And that actually is it's a pretty brutal game of Fabula.
Brutal game then if you do that then.
Yes. It was a lot of fun because we did have a guardian or whatever the class is called if it's not called guardian, the shieldy guy. And
well, the job is called guardian, but
yeah, I thought it was called guardian. And so nobody has chosen death yet, but if you put the right thing up against death, you'll find that even your challenge-driven players will eventually have something that they care about, that they're willing to die for. And you learn something about them then. That was what they were willing to die for, and it's meaningful that they chose to die for that. Whereas if they died because of the fact that they rolled a natural 1 against some kind of instant death trap that was in the dungeon, is that as meaningful? It does teach the lesson that death can sometimes be random and meaningless, but... Right.
Yeah, Kurth, absolutely not. I think challenge-based play is really fun, and I think there's a definite place for it. And there's a reason why certain systems will always be, games that I'm going to go back to again and again and again. Because sometimes I want to play a TTRPG because I want to indulge in what Magic the Gathering call my inner spike. Right? I want to be challenged and I want to have that competition. And to somebody, I think it was Poor Kid who kept talking about it's a game for the players, not the character sheets. I actually do think that's wrong, Poor Kid. And I'm going to quote Ray Winiger here, who was a famous, well, he was recently the D&D brand manager, but a long time ago, he was a very prolific adventure writer and system designer, and he came up with these rules of dungeon craft. And one of the ones that stuck with me the most is a great D&D adventure. A great D&D adventure challenges the player and the player character. And I actually think that when you challenge both, that is when you reach the ideal moment. I do agree that there's a point to be challenging the player, but I also think there's a point to be challenging the player character. That's why we make them. And I will follow that up by saying, in these story-based games that we're talking about, you are being challenged. In fact, you might be being challenged in a way that you suck at. And that's why you don't like it, which is fine. People can just engage with it. The challenge, though, isn't, are you good enough to beat the bandits? The challenge is, can you create an interesting story? Can you make your character interesting? Can you add an element to the game that makes it something that people would want to listen to or watch, right? Basically, can you make a good movie? And I'm sure there's a lot of books and a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows that you have watched and read, and you know going into the movie that Captain America is not going to die at the end of the film. And you certainly know he's not going to fall down a 20-foot pit and just die randomly at minute 23 of the movie. But that doesn't mean that you're not engaged in the movie, and it doesn't mean that the emotional stakes aren't real, and it doesn't mean that you're not invested. And to finally,
Derek,
quote Mouseguard,
are you
I just
sure?
want to quote Mouseguard. I just want to quote Mouseguard. Mouseguard, which is an indie RPG, but it says carved. They're little mice that defend. They're anthropomorphic mice, and it says carved into their headquarters. It says, "It matters not what you fight, but what you fight for." And that game doesn't ask whether or not you can beat something. It asks you, why are you fighting at all? And that's what that game cares about. And it cares about understanding that answer, not whether or not you win. So again, different TTRPGs serve different masters. And there's no black and white. There's gradient shades all across it, of course. But some games like Fabula Ultima and Daggerheart definitely lean more towards collaborative storytelling and narrative creation. And then other games like, say Shadowdark, or lean more towards, or DCC, lean more towards, hey, let's challenge the players and their characters, right? To see if they can problem solve their way out of this. And if they can't, the consequences may involve their character dying. But it's not like you kick them out of your campaign when that happens. People are like, death is so meaningful. Is it? When people die in my campaigns, they're usually rolled a new character. They're back in and I don't know. I try to get them in the next encounter.
One door shuts, another one opens.
I got players who go, all right, I'm excited. I get to roll a new character. This is a great day. So yeah.
I'm going to toss in my 2 cents on this topic.
All right.
Now, I haven't thought about this topic as much as you two guys have. And you guys have a lot more experience than I do with Daggerheart and is it Fabula Ultima?
Mm-hmm.
Fabula Ultima, yes.
So like Fabulous Ultimate.
It's Latin, I think.
It's Latin for final.
Oh, like a fable. Final Fable.
It's Latin for like Final
Fantasy
or Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Final Fantasy.
In fact, Fabula Ultima, it calls itself a TTJRPG. So
and it has very Final Fantasy aesthetic, shall we say?
Let's say that.
Okay, so let's call those what would you say? Player-driven narrative. Is that
the
a good
GM
way to
still
say
has
that?
a role to draw, but yes, the players have a lot more agency in driving the narrative.
Mm-hmm. And the players have the ultimate say on whether the character dies or not.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going to call those player-driven narrative games versus traditional games.
Yeah, that's a good way.
So my experience is just traditional games then. So that's obviously going to give me a strong bias in that favor, just because I haven't experienced those other games yet, and I haven't seen their the upsides, the pros on a first-hand basis. But I wrote 2 notes of like counterpoints as why I think the traditional one is better. First of all, it's awesome to kill characters with monsters. And for a player to deny me that, I can't take that.
You know what? I appreciate the honesty, at least in that one. You're like, I just love a dead PC. What can I say?
Oh, it's so thrilling. So my philosophy is this: whoever's turn it is, I'm on their side. So if it's a player's turn, I as a GM am that player's advocate. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. Let's figure out some way that you might be able to do it. Maybe you, the player, aren't noticing something that I know your character would be noticing. So I'll tell you that. I'll give you quote unquote meta information because like it would be I think it'd be obvious to your character, or maybe your character would probably know, since I know where he's from in the world, he would know what that god is, even though you, the player, may not have read that lore or whatnot.
Right.
And maybe you want to try something that's outside the rules, and maybe I can make you some kind of deal. Like, okay, like technically that breaks the action economy, but what if I make you this offer and you like do this skill check, and if you succeed, then you pull off the out of the side the box idea, and if you fail, then like the enemy opportunity attacks you, and you don't get to do your acrobatic stunt or whatever. So try to advocate for the player when it's the player's turn. When it's the monster's turn, I'm in the monster's head. And those vicarious experiences for me, both from a player character and from the monsters, are some of the most wonderful. That's one of the reasons why I play these games. Those experiences drive me so much because they're so powerful to me, and it's just being there, like in the mind of the vampire, or in the quote unquote feeling being in the body of the like brain eating carrion crawler, like that. I don't know. That really inspires me and motivates me a lot. And when the players succeed, I'm there with them and like celebrating in their victory. And I love that moment. And if the monster eats you, like, I think that's amazing. And I love that moment too.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let me blow your mind a little bit.
Okay.
I, as a player and as a GM, so both, basically don't care about nor seek immersion in any stretch of the form.
Well, like lots of people aren't immersion gamers.
Yeah. So like I don't care.
I would argue that there is an implicit immersion that's probably subconscious for you.
My goal when I play an RPG is I'm thinking about it as if I was if a movie or a play was happening on stage, and I'm watching it as from the director's seat, or from the audience seat if I'm a player. Or sometimes I'm an audience member as the GM, right? I'm watching the movie and I'm seeing it happen. This idea that a lot of like, and I understand it's a very common thing, but like I have no desire to like become my character. I'm always very aware that my character is a game piece, and is being used to facilitate that participant in a game. But it's funny because you were talking about like I am the vampire lord, and I'm thinking about I'm putting myself.
What's the difference between becoming your character and vicariously experiencing things through the eyes of your character?
So all I'm simply saying is my thought process. It depends on the game. To be clear, there are moments when if I'm playing some old school dungeon delver slaughter fest. Sure, but then I'm doing what I'm doing in service of the game's aesthetic
style. Yeah.
I'm not doing it because that's what the monster would do. And in fact, a lot of times when I quote unquote get a monster's turn, especially, and you're not as familiar with it, but like Daggerheart doesn't have initiative and it doesn't have turn order.
I'm very curious to experience that.
Yeah. But like, so when I get my opportunity as the GM to make a move, I'm not always thinking like, what would this monster do? I'm thinking, what would make this cool? Like how would I make this look good in a movie? And so I might use the monster's turn to just, rage and bellow. It might not even do anything. But you're not doing any hit points. You're not threatening the creature's attack. You're not putting a status effect on the players. I know, but if I was making this movie, if I was directing this movie, this would be a great scene for the werewolf to just be standing on the mountain, highlighted with the moon, and howling, and the sheer dread of it, right, kind of falls over the audience. And I'm like, yeah, that was it. That was my turn. Back to you guys. And they're like, but you didn't attack it. Well, I'm not trying to attack you. I can't kill you even if I wanted to. So there's no point in me trying to beat you, because the game isn't about me beating you. The game is about creating the coolest experience that I can. And that's one way to play the game. And there's other ways to play the game. And I enjoy those other ways too. So yeah. No, Craig Spurs, Daggerheart has no action economy. There is no action economy.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm curious to see that.
Daggerheart
Here's
has
my
action
other point.
economy, but
Oh.
it is all in a different economy that becomes the action economy as well as other things, and so therefore it's kind of tied together.
I mean, yeah, the number one rule in Daggerheart is the GM can take a turn and a move whenever they want. So already that kind of flies in the face of action economy.
Well, wait a minute though. They still have to, in general, spend a fear or have a thing that says that you can keep spotlight. Then what's the point of the monsters that say keep spotlight up to 4 times without spending a fear?
There is no point. It actually isn't. The core GM rule in Daggerheart is you can take a move whenever you want.
But it also suggests that you.
Now it says if the players roll with fear, you may want to take a move.
It doesn't say that you have to, for sure.
No, you may. But you can also take a move.
It generally says that if you're going to interrupt them just out of the blue when they don't roll with fear, that you're going to be spending a fear for that.
Again, you might, you should, maybe you could. It all depends on what you're doing with the move and how you're using it. But to be honest with you,
by that stint, the general rule of D&D and Pathfinder is that there are no rules because it says you can change the rules in Rule 0.
That is correct. But in this case, Daggerheart's primary rule is the GM can take a move whenever they want. But in this case, any case, point is there is no action economy, so it is a little bit wonky.
Yeah, I'll just have to experience that because it is quite different than what I've experienced previously, and so it's very hard for me to make any comment about it just because it's so different. But I will check it out.
I kind of agree with Todd.
I have a second point.
Todd said Daggerheart was made for actor kids. I kind of agree with that. With a bunch of tactical RPG players chase the fad and try to put a square peg in a round hole. Yeah, that's kind of right.
I think that there's a little more nuance to that because it
comes from a group of actors, right? That's what
I think there's more nuance than that because they were trying to get some of the tactical people, they added tactical elements to it. It wasn't they were like, this is just for our actor kids, and we made it even more actory than Powered by the Apocalypse, and we're very surprised that these tactical people are coming in here. They were targeting those tactical people to come in.
It was a deliberate attempt to meet, the crunchy 5e players and the super indie narrative PBTA players and try to meet them somewhere in the middle.
I have a second counterpoint.
Yeah, second counterpoint.
That I noted down. Now, this one is very, very anecdotal, so I don't know if you guys really are going to put much credit to it, but I will say this. I was thinking there, and I've had previous experiences with players who said, my character shouldn't die at this moment. Is a moment when their character got killed in whatever. Could be a climactic boss battle, could be a basic encounter with like some run-of-the-mill monsters, could be you didn't notice the pit trap and you fell down and died. So I have had a number of experiences over the decades of GMing of players who said, no, my character shouldn't die right now. And those players, I cannot think of one single exception. They were all players who made our campaign stressful or negative or drove the campaign into the ground. I do not miss any of those players. So maybe that's just a difference of like play styles, or like they would rather be playing that other type of game.
I think that's very much likely to be the case. And they made your play style stressful, and that they caused friction for your group because they were playing the wrong game, basically.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not saying that the Daggerheart Fabula Ultima style of death and dying is better. By the way, I'm more likely to play games that
I don't think it's better either.
I'm not saying it's worse. It's different. I actually play more games that have a death or dying system that's closer to D&D or Pathfinder, such as D&D and Pathfinder. So I think people, when they watched this earlier and heard Garrick and me making the arguments that would be made by those games in favor of those games, it may have sounded like we were saying those games have a better death and dying system. I don't think they do. They have a different one. It has different values to it.
So a great example of this is I love racket sports. In fact, I have to leave shortly to go play racquetball. But I also like to play tennis. And I don't play as much anymore. But I have friends who I play tennis with. And you say, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to play tennis with John. I'm going to go play tennis with John and his wife. what am I really meaning there? What I mean is, when John and I get together to play tennis, we just try to keep the ball in play. You know, we're just trying to hit it over the net, get some exercise. We chat, we catch up on each other's lives. We're playing tennis, but we're really just trying to see like, oh, cool. We had a rally going for 20 balls. That was a lot of fun. You know,
we didn't hit it over the fence.
We didn't hit it over the fence. It's great. But then I also have friends that I play tennis with. And when we play, it's okay. Love all, you know, love serving love. And I'm serving to win. And I'm hitting hard shots and I'm applying topspin and I'm working them to one side of the court and I'm hitting a winner to the other side of the court and I'm trying to crush them into the ground. That is tennis as competition. And the other one is tennis as, you know, exercise and social. Now, if we were playing doubles and we're all here to compete, we're here to win. And somebody shows up and they're just like, oh, I'm just here to like hit the ball and have fun. And, you know, I'm not really trying to win. That person's going to stick out in your game where everyone else is trying to play to win. And you have a player here who goes, I'm not really interested in winning or losing. I just want to like hang out and be part of the fun. And so your D&D game that you were describing is a group of players who are all locked in on this core premise of, hey, we make good choices, we win. We make bad choices, we lose. And they're not really bought into that core premise. Yeah, that's going to be someone who's going to be irritating.
It's the same if it's in the other direction, too. If a lot of other people are just here to have fun.
We're here to have fun.
And then just, like, Derek comes in and he's
ball.
Playing this min-max build that just can crush the entire adventure into oblivion or something like that because he's like, I came here to win. It can actually, he can be the disruption there.
Charm person. Oh, no.
Right. Yeah, so if everybody else is here to just
those players, those negative players that I just mentioned there, they were not I just want to hang out type players. I think they wanted to control things. They were controlling players. Okay.
Now there is a third possibility.
Overstepping the boundaries.
I think the third possibility is that you have players who there's a third possibility. The third possibility is players who at least think that they want a competition-based game, right? Because they want to prove to themselves how good they are. But they're a baby and they don't want any consequences for their actions. So that is a distinct possibility. That's where somebody signs up to play, you know, in a tournament and loses and then, you know, has a, you know, hissy fit because they lost. And you're like, oh, your problem is just you're immature. And, you know, this is a game of winners and losers and you lost. And that's part of the premise of signing up to play in this, you know, type of game is you can lose sometimes and you're just being a baby about it.
But I think what Esper is talking about is more someone who would fit better with a game where the players had more narrative. They had a more role in deciding the narrative because it sounded like what he was saying is they wanted to decide some component of the narrative themselves, but they couldn't because it was D&D where that's the GM's job, not the player's job.
Yeah, I remember one player distinctly, his character got killed by hobgoblins in a dungeon. And he was like, the stakes weren't high enough. You can't just have my character die off these stupid hobgoblins. And like, I don't think he ever played D&D or we never played again after that.
Yeah. And that, you know, that sounds like, I mean, here, we talked about Fabula Ultima, right? About how you can choose to sacrifice or surrender. Your character can't even sacrifice unless a villain with a capital V is present on the scene. So like the game won't even let you die if it's just a kind of, you know, random encounter, you know, like some throwaway fight. You literally can't choose to kill your character and go out in a blaze of glory. The only time that your character can die is if you choose to and if the stakes are high enough. Because that game basically says we don't want one of our cool main protagonist characters
to get killed by a couple hobgoblins.
You know, case in point.
I think that would make me feel like the hobgoblins in the pit trap were fake then. And I can't, it's hard for me to believe the game if they feel fake.
It's a role-playing game. It's all fake. But like, think about the scene from the...
Well, we have real experiences and we make real sacrifices to play it.
Right. But an experience is driven by an emotional reaction to a moment. So as an example,
we sacrifice money, time, put ourselves at social risk to play the game. Those are real.
So let me ask you an example. A great scene from a movie I rewatched recently, Captain America, The Winter Soldier. There's a famous scene where Captain America's on an elevator and he, it's full of Hydra agents, and he gets stopped, and he has to beat them all, right? I assume you know the scene. All right, it's our main character.
I don't keep up with a lot of movies.
All right, well, it's like
he gets on an elevator and he finds out that
movie.
Everybody else who was on the elevator with him were like secretly working for the bad guys instead of his organization, and then he has to beat them up.
Okay, but point is, as a moviegoer, your Captain America is not going to die there. And so, what is the point of that scene in the movie? So why put that scene in the movie, right? It's only a 2-hour movie,
Sure. So it's, the two different styles are kind of like, one's a movie, and then the other one's more like what would you say, like a sport or a competition, where there's like these objective rules that we're all playing by. As opposed to the movie one is the point is to perpetuate an interesting story.
I'm going to use a movie as an analogy to explain why, to bring us back in a circle on this, because movies could kill Captain America in the elevator, but people will get angry. Say you had the pilot of a famous starship in a space western who made it through a gauntlet of very difficult things, and everybody survived. And then after he landed, he's like, "We're done, guys." A spike goes through his head, and he just suddenly dies at random. That could happen, and it might piss people off, right?
Right. Correct. That did that.
What?
But I get the sensation. Esper might not know Firefly either, but
yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. So that was in.
I'm surprisingly out of the loop on.
Yes, that was in the movie Serenity.
Not everything.
It was literally in a movie that that they did that. But the point of me telling that story is the fact that so many people got angry about it when it did happen in a movie is because of the same reason that some percentage of people who are playing at the RPG don't want to see the hobgoblins killing them. Whereas I don't mind if it's really, really bad luck and all of those other things happen, the fact that the hobgoblins could kill me. But I understand that people might not want them to do that, but that doesn't mean they're fake, because they could do something else that is really bad, or maybe even worse than dying in some ways.
So I will further add to this by saying, you mentioned that your game is almost more like a sport, okay? And that's a really good way. There's rules. We agree to follow them. We're not going to cheat. We're not going to fudge, right? And the stakes are real, right? If you win,
and you don't automatically get to be Captain America.
You don't automatically get to be Captain, but
you got to earn it. Yeah.
Right. Well, this isn't a movie. It's not the football movie. It's not the kid who came from the streets and he makes his way into the team, and then in the final seconds of the game he catches the winning touchdown and everybody cheers and then everybody clapped and that was the end of the movie. No, right. Now, so here's the problem. The problem is, and sports, by the way, I'm talking about real sports, are obviously dramatic, right? They create dramatic moments. People are very engaged with sports because they create these dramatic moments, right? Just like D&D. But sometimes sports are fucking blowouts. And sometimes it's 50-0 and they never had a chance. And sometimes it's a complete, it's a nothing burger. Sometimes it's boring as hell. Sometimes it goes, why are we even playing? This other team is so out, everything is broken against us, and this is completely out of pocket. And that's why games that purport to be about challenge, right? Like, and sporting, right? Have now gone the other way and have really been like, how do we make the game a sport, but balance it so carefully and so cautiously that you never get a blowout either way, right? And so it's almost like you've taken the core premise of how do we create a sport, but how do we change the rules of the sport so that we avoid blowouts and we avoid the 48-0 score where the audience who paid tickets to watch the game goes, that was a really boring game. Everybody wants the World Series that goes to Game 7, and it's the bottom of the ninth, and there's runners on bases, and it's a grand slam, walk-off home run, and right? Nobody wants the World Series that's over in 4, and each game is just a shutout. Nobody, when you watch sports, you're hoping
it is real.
It is real.
It is real, though. Yeah,
it is real.
Like
but
that's the other side of that coin is like,
correct.
Well, it was real. It wasn't it wasn't a fake game or a produced game.
But sometimes real is boring, and we choose to play these games presumably because they're exciting and dramatic, and we're
Mhm.
engaged with that. So again, different strokes for different folks. I know,
Right.
I know people. This is a Derek opinion. Let's say
So are you going to be running Daggerheart for me at some point? You sold me on the premise so much.
but like, let me give
Like,
you this
be
is
like
legit.
a crime at this point not to
Red
not
Hulk
to do that.
Red Hulk, you are completely right. The Dodgers are going to make this a real short series. But this is a statement that I will truthfully make, which is, I would rather go into a D&D campaign, a D&D session, and TPK in an awesome way than level up in a very boring way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I'm not there to win. I'm
Mhm.
not there to succeed.
Mhm.
I'm not there to be my character. I'm there.
Yeah.
Derek Melinda is there because I want to have a good time. You know, I'm almost like, I don't care who wins as long as it's a great game. So that's my philosophy, you know,
Mhm.
and from a sporting analogy, I don't care if my team wins. I don't care if the other team wins. What I hope is it's a great game and it's a back and forth and it's got great plays and it's got amazing moments. I don't want to see if my team wins and they win 11-0. I'm like, that was boring. They're like, yeah, but your team won. And I go, so I don't care. I came here to be entertained.
So
And
speaking of a
the
back
mere
and a
act of
forth,
winning.
do you have to go to racquetball?
I do.
Okay,
But
I'm just wondering.
no, Esper's this is good. He's got way more interesting insights than
He
we
does,
normally
and he
get
has lots of good
from-
questions. He knows how to draw you in to talk about interesting things.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I guess Esper, I guess I have to run for
I've
you.
got more. I've got more thoughts from there, but if you got to go,
No, I my game's at 6 today, so I've
Oh,
got.
it's a little later.
It's a little later. Normally, it's at like 5:30 or 5:45. But
so you're saying I can. So you're saying I can.
You
say
can
the
ask
next
one
thing.
more
you
question
can keep going.
for us, I think.
Well, okay. Thank you for my allotment. It's another parallel I was thinking of as you were describing all this is fiction versus nonfiction. It's sort of like the narrative player driven game is more like fiction, whereas the objective, these are the rules, anything can kill you, is more like nonfiction. It's like, well, those are the rules. You died. That's just what happened. I
With
would
that
say
being
that
said,
the
Do you throw?
It's-
Would you
it's-
throw
it-
like a CR10 at your party? Like that's
it's-
level 1.
depends what you mean by throw at them. Like force them in a room where they have no escape and they have to fight this thing and it's unfair and cruel. No, I would not do that.
But that could happen in real
Now,
life.
they could potentially encounter the CR10 and they have to do something clever to escape from it or beguile it or whatever.
Right. But it is a possibility in real life.
In fact, in
Yeah,
real
it's-
life,
it's-
more often.
It's not a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Let me cook. Let me cook here. All right. It's not a perfect
Okay.
analogy, but generally speaking, one seems more like reminds me more of fiction. One reminds me more of nonfiction. One is more like we are here to craft this story. We want the story to keep developing because it's an interesting story, presumably. And then the other one's more of we are here to engage in these challenges almost in a competitive way, and at the end of the day what the dice really rolled and the real consequences of the real thing that happened, that's we want it to be real.
I think
I would say that the again, this is a very broad stroke and a very imperfect analogy, but I would say that in general the greatest works of fiction are greater than the greatest nonfiction moments. I think the greatest works of fiction, I mean, the best books, the best movies, the best sculptures, paintings, the best stories, those will have longer lasting, broadly reaching, human heart winning effects more than the best sports game ever, the most intense battle in history, the, you know, greatest work of feat of architecture and engineering. I think reliably on a general, like in general, reliably nonfiction is going to beat fiction because most people aren't that great at creating a whole new thing out of their imagination. And the real world, even though sometimes it is boring or lopsided, it's at least real and it like hits something inside of you, like that, something on an instinctual level. You're like, oh, that gives me information that helps me as a being that's trying to survive on planet Earth.
So
But the greatest story is going to win. I will ask a giant asterisk on top of this. Ideally, the fiction and the nonfiction align together and they become one and the same thing. And that's like the gold star at the apex of the sky that we would all want.
So I think that when we talk about RPG design, Esper, you have pulled in a very famous, two of the three of a very famous trichotomy. What you were calling fiction is often called narrative style gaming, and what you were calling nonfiction is often called simulation style gaming. And it's because it's not really nonfiction. Okay, it's just it is trying to simulate at least some aspects of reality, but there's certainly a lot of things that are still abstracted. Even if we take away that, well, you can't throw fireballs and say it was a modern RPG, there's still things that are abstracted and that we're not really going all the way into reality on. But so the idea of simulation versus narrative, with the third one in that particular trifecta being gamism, which is like, is it a fun game to play? Is something that a lot of people talk about. Obviously, with any of these, when you split everything off into two or three things, it's a vast oversimplification, and you can't really collapse everything into those buckets. But it definitely, there's a lot of discussion you'll find on exactly what you said. And
there's probably at least 50 to 60 hours of me talking about GNS theory on my channel. So we've talked about this dichotomy a lot. And you're absolutely right, because there are people who believe that role-playing games, when played in a very stimulationist, which you called nonfiction style, which I think is totally fine, create what feels, in a sense, to be more real. And that can create a stronger emotional connection to it than, say, writing something that is quote unquote a better story. And by the way, that's why I don't think that I'm not trying to advocate that one is better than the other. I'm simply saying that they scratch different issues. Sometimes I want to watch, a fiction action movie, and sometimes I want to watch a documentary, and I can get just as moved by a real story. Sometimes learning about some event that really happened can be just as engaging and moving, especially when you go, wow, that really happened. This isn't just made up. And so,
a movie that's based on real events. I think that has that element in there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the ideal thing that I would be, questing for, like the ultimate thing I'm seeking for is to me as a writer, craft a narrative, craft a world, and at the same time people engage with that in like rules-based, objective, competitive, if you want to say it that way, fashion. I think there is a way. It's not necessarily easy, but there's a way for the mythic narrative world and the objective factual world to meet and dance together in unison.
Yeah. Well,
it's a rare thing, though. A lot of people aren't good at coming up with great stories and great characters.
I agree. But I think
that's a skill set.
Yeah. But your approach to it, which you gave much earlier, I think is like the healthiest way that people can approach it, which is you say, I'm here to create challenges and do this stuff. And when it's the monster's turn, I'm gonna fuck you up. But when it's the player, but I'm not the bad guy.
And I'm gonna make funny noises while I'm doing it.
I'm not the bad guy. When it's your turn, when it's your turn, I'm advocating for you. I'm advocating on behalf of the players. In fact, one of the core rules that most of these Powered by the Apocalypse games, have is, be a fan of the PCs. So I think a lot of times when people go down the nonfiction route, they cast themselves into the light of the villain, of the bad guy. And I think that's where you can get into problems with DMs, abusing their situation and abusing their powers and stuff like that.
Like nasty tyrant GMs or GMs that they seem to just want to torture the players.
Right.
That's terrible. I hate that.
And to be clear, the purpose of a game engine like Daggerheart or Fabula Ultima isn't so that the GM can write a story and then take the players through it and there's nothing that will disrupt it. In fact, just the opposite. Daggerheart and Fabula Ultima actively encourage the GM to do little to no prep work. Instead, everything that happens is this organic collaborative experience. It becomes more akin to an improv session, but instead of the people just making up stuff, you use the dice as a sort of RNG to take the story in new and exciting and interesting directions that you would have never thought of on your own. And
real magic can happen with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so regardless of whether you're talking about playing a fiction or a nonfiction style, I think the greatest sin is when we ignore the dice and we just say, you know,
That's not what I planned.
That's not what I planned. So this is what happens. And we start fudging. Right. And I think that if you're going to play your style or, you know, the story-based style, you can't fudge. It just defeats the whole purpose of playing the game. So
it's not real. It's a concocted thing. And then it's like, why are we even doing this? I'm not actually achieving anything. You're robbing me of the ability to actually achieve.
Right. Because whether it's a story or a fiction or nonfiction, I think that the most important thing for TTRPG is player agency, right? The ability for players to make meaningful decisions that matter. Now, in your game, that might be, do you live or do you die? Right? Because of the decisions that you made. In a game like Fabula Ultima, the player's decision might be like, well, who ends up on the throne? Right? The uncle who is power hungry, but is probably better equipped to lead the country, or the princess who is young and naive, but her heart's in the right place. Right. And so either way, we're making decisions that matter and change the outcome. And by the way, that same situation could also be in your game. I'm simply saying, like, what is the primary focus or goal of what we're trying to overcome? But yeah.
Does Daggerheart say that GMs are encouraged to do little to no prep? Interesting, because Matt Mercer is like this major prepper. Like he preps obscene amounts. I think he said like the majority of the stuff he preps does, not the majority, but large portions of stuff he preps never even gets used.
You can always prep more than the system tells you to do as a minimum. That is something I have learned from, I'm more improvisational, but from having, my wife Linda is a super prepper. You can always prep more than the system expects you to prep, and it won't hurt you.
The prep is never ending.
Yeah, it won't hurt you other than the time that you spent on the prep if you feel that you didn't enjoy that prep. If Matt loves his prep, and
I mean, if you enjoy doing it, better to have it and not need it than need it and not have
absolutely.
it.
And you definitely can
What's
prep
curious is that he's known for his improvisation. And he's a wonderfully talented
he's a great GM.
Improviser. Yeah. So he's got both going on, though I do find it.
He also is paid millions of dollars to GM, so he has the luxury to do whatever he wants to do. These games historically have really encouraged you not to prep much, because you want to be able to, have the players literally to be literally unbiased in the direction that the story might go. I mean,
it seems difficult to tell a in-depth, meaningful, layered, crafted story without spending prep time.
Which is where some people run into the problem. Yeah, and they say, I have a hard time running this game. And a lot of times the answer is, you're not supposed to do it on your own. A lot of times, and this is where people also, lose their minds, as you go, guys, what should be in this next room? And you're like asking that to the players. And so like, the idea being like, there's a spider monster, and one of the players goes, what if it has like a gem in its abdomen that can shoot out fire rays that can burn us alive? And I'm like, great, cool. I'm going to add that, because if the GM is just trying to do it all on their own, it can be a little overwhelming. The key is to bring your players in on the collaboration. And people go, why would I ever create a spider monster and add to it a fiery death ray? Because it would look cool on camera and it'd be fun to fight. It's probably going to
retriever. It's like almost a retriever.
It is almost a retriever. Great shout out. So it's a different mentality. You're right. Why, Derek? I think this football team that we're playing up against is too weak. I think you should add a really, really great, powerful quarterback to it, so it'll be a really cool fight. A really cool game. Well, if you're thinking from the perspective of I want to win, then you're never going to suggest that. You're going to be like, hey, let's count our lucky stars. In fact, we went out of our way to make sure that quarterback would be sick today. But from a narrative perspective, it might be cooler if the monsters has some cool ability, and the players are more excited about that. So yeah, it's a very different way of approaching the games. But they're all trying to get to the same point, I think which is a dungeon.
If you have 6 for your racquetball, you probably need to get out.
I do need to
extremely soon.
I have to leave in the next minute. So.
Yeah, so before we go, just one last time, Esper's Kickstarter is Gauntlet Runner. I'm going to put it in the chat one more time as well for everybody, so be sure to check it out. Thanks for joining us.
I'll definitely have to check it out. It looks pretty cool.
Thanks for joining us on Roll for Combat Live.
Put into it.
Until next time, if you want to battle
Thanks, everybody.
You have to roll
for combat.
Roll for combat.